Chapter 1041. Everyone shivered when they heard this. Were there such frightening words of love? It was more like a threat. Fu Beija got up and pulled Wei Wei Bai along. You guys eat first, I'll go settle some personal matters. The other party immediately got up to send them off. Wei Wei Bai was dragged away by him. When they got back into the car, Fu Beija held her hand and went to a prison. The adjutant immediately came up to serve them, bringing them chairs and serving them tea. Wei Wei Bai saw that there were screams everywhere in the gloomy prison. There were all kinds of cruel torture instruments hanging on the walls, and they were all stained with black blood. She didn't know how many people had been tortured. Fu Beija was used to this kind of place. He glanced at Wei Wei Bai and saw that she was lowering her head and fiddling with the lid of the teacup, removing the foam. Her actions were very elegant. She wasn't afraid at all. How did the Bai family raise such a daughter? They were obviously civil officials for generations. Was this the strength of a civil official? Fu Beija thought about the scene later. After laying the groundwork for so long, he softened his stance in front of her for a while. She should open up her heart a little. Fu Beija said coldly, "Where's Li Xinghe?" Every time he said this name, he would look at Wei Wei Bai casually. He wanted to see the expression on her face. If they really knew each other, if their feelings were really not ordinary. Fu Beija clenched his fingers, and a murderous look flashed past his eyes. He didn't want to think too deeply, otherwise, it would be a scene of a brutal killing. She was such a delicate girl, and those bloody images made him uncomfortable. But he had always been merciless to betrayers. The bodyguard next to him came forward. We tortured him, but he refused to talk. Fu Beija sneered. He's a tough guy. Hang him up, I'll interrogate him personally. Wei Wei Bai sat upright, still wondering why the small mission hadn't appeared. Li Xinghe had better not die for real, or else the side quest would still be hanging over his head. She also didn't have a system to chat with. In addition, the pressure from the collapse of the soul channel caused her to grip the teacup a little tighter. Just a little bit of nervousness. However, this was caught by Fu Beija. He gritted his teeth secretly. Why was he so nervous? Did she really get together with that gigolo Li Xinghe? The person was quickly dragged over. His head was full of blood, his hair was messy, and his body was filthy. It was obvious that he had suffered terrible torture. Wei Wei Bai took a few glances but couldn't see her face at all. Several strong soldiers tied his hands and dropped him on a hook hanging from the roof. The man dangled from the ground like a piece of meat. Wei Wei Bai felt her hand hurt when she saw it. Fu Beija directly took out a thorny whip from the torture instrument and smashed it on the ground, making a terrifying crisp sound. Then, he walked over and whipped him a few times. The hanging Li Xinghe groaned a few times. Wei Wei Bai couldn't see his face clearly, but she heard his voice. It was indeed Li Xinghe's. She continued to bear with it silently. Because there was no small mission to remind her, she didn't dare to act rashly. Fu Beija suspected her, so she could only continue to bear with it. She couldn't let him see through her easily. This man was a vicious and merciless master. If she was remembered by him, not to mention favorability, she might even lose her life. Fu Beija whipped Li Xinghe a few times. The whip penetrated his bones and blood flowed to the ground. Fu Beija coldly snorted, "You're a tough bone. You didn't even make a sound." He suddenly turned around, "Pour salt water on me. Don't die." Slash. Chapter 1042. Pouring salt water directly on the wound was so painful that it could kill. However, it could prevent the wound from becoming infected and delay the victim's life. The thick salt water was quickly brought over and directly splashed on Li Xinghe's body. Li Xinghe finally couldn't take it anymore and screamed. This scream was short and muffled, although it was quickly followed by a muffled groan. However, that voice was definitely Li Xinghe's. Wei Wei Bai wasn't sure if it was Li Xinghe, but just by listening to the voice, it was definitely that man's voice. She looked at the teacup and frowned. When Fu Beija saw her frown and saw that she had obtained some evidence, his eyes became even more vicious and cruel. He said, "You don't want to say who your accomplice is, but your bones are tough. Anyway, you only have a mouth, so let's break your legs first." Wei Wei Bai thought that he was going to break the other party's legs. In the end, Fu Beija asked someone to bring over a set of torture tools, which was a boning knife. Fu Beija picked up the sharp knife and directly stabbed it into Li Xinghe's calf. The knife was very sharp and thin, and it cut open the flesh in an instant. This scene was like a live autopsy scene. Although Bai Weiwei had seen a lot of bloody scenes, such a straightforward scene of flesh and blood still made her uncomfortable. Her expression changed. "Fu Beija, that's enough, you're too cruel." Even if she was not afraid of death, it didn't mean that she wasn't disgusted. If she didn't react to such a scene, then she would be considered to have broken her character. Fu Beija stopped his actions, and the knife was inserted into Li Xinghe's bones. Li Xinghe gritted his teeth and endured, but he couldn't help it and let out a muffled cry that made people's scalps go numb. Suddenly, Li Xinghe said, "Wei Wei, you go first, don't worry about me." When Bai Weiwei heard the other party say this, her expression almost collapsed. Was it really that big idiot Li Xinghe? Saying such things at a time like this was going to get her killed. As expected, Fu Beija's lips trembled. He looked at Wei Wei Bai with dark eyes. "Do you know each other?" Almost instinctively, Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows and curled her pink lips as she looked at him with a half-smile. "Of course I know him. Didn't that bastard kidnap me and make me fall off the train? It's not like I lost my memory. How could I forget him?" Even if they knew each other, they could not say that they knew each other. This side mission was really unreliable. Couldn't it just die rather than submit? Why did it drag her down with it before it died? He had dragged her down with him. He was truly hopeless. Fu Beija looked at her deeply. He turned around and stabbed the knife in his hand into her calf bone. The tip of the knife came out from her calf. That scene was frightening. Wei Wei Bai's lips were pale. She suddenly slammed the teacup on the table. "Fu Beija, I feel terrible. I want to go back." These words were not polite at all. Fu Beija finally lost his cool. He laughed softly and said, "Don't be like this. Isn't this the enemy who almost killed you? Don't you want revenge?" Wei Wei Bai frowned. "You might as well just stab him. Who tortures people like you? I feel terrible looking at this scene. Just let me go." Fu Beija pulled the knife out and cut off Li Xinghe's calf. A few drops of blood splattered on his handsome face, bringing with it a terrifying murderous aura. His voice was surprisingly gentle. "You are my wife. You have to get used to this." Wei Wei Bai held her breath and her face turned red. She suddenly stood up and wanted to leave. Fu Beija ordered coldly, "Stop right there, Wei Wei Bai." Wei Wei Bai did not stop, but was stopped by two adjutants. Chapter 1043. Her little face was cold as she clenched her fingers and turned to look at Fu Beija. "What do you mean?" Fu Beija finally showed his cold side. "What do I mean? Li Xinghe said that he hid in your house for 3 days. What did you do in those 3 days?" Wei Wei Bai was confused for a moment. 3 days? What 3 days? Fu Beija slowly used the knife to cut Li Xinghe's calf. "It means that you stayed together for 3 days, a single man and a single woman." "What did you do?" Li Xinghe desperately tried to explain in pain. "We didn't do anything. Don't accuse us." Wei Wei Bai felt that it was better for Li Xinghe not to open his mouth. Was he deliberately trying to kill her? Why did he seem to be on the brink of death with every sentence? Wei Wei Bai knew that she could not handle this well. Her previous strategy had all collapsed. The more pressure she was under, the calmer she became. She was panicking inside. She had to act cool too. She suddenly turned around and walked forward step by step. The ground was stained with blood. Her low-heeled shoes stepped on it without hesitation. Her footsteps were stained with blood, like a gorgeous flower. Fu Beija's face was cold as he stared at her without moving his eyes. It was as if he wanted to see the truth on her face that would make him a cuckold. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were crystal clear and there was clear anger in them. She suddenly reached out and snatched the knife in Fu Beija's hand. Fu Beija was not really tricked by her. She wanted to snatch the knife, so he gave it to her. Anyway, she could not kill him. But the next moment, he saw her pick up the sharp knife and cut Li Xinghe's chest ruthlessly. His clothes were cut open and there was a deep cut on his chest. Even his flesh was exposed. The warm blood splattered on Wei Wei Bai's face. Her calm face was like a flower that bloomed. It was gorgeous and calm. Wei Wei Bai stared at his chest and then she said with a cold smile, "Fu Beija, I know what you are suspecting. 3 days ago, Li Xinghe was in my room." As soon as she said this, Fu Beija's expression changed. His own suspicion was completely different from the impact of her words. His heart turned cold. The next second, Bai Weiwei took the sharp knife and pointed it at his chest. She looked up and said coldly, "At that time, he was sitting in a chair in my room. He was shot in the chest. He held the gun and said he was going to kill me. I didn't know him at all." Fu Beija said, "S lips turned white. And then? He took a liking to you and didn't want to kill you. You were influenced by him, so you saved him. That scene. The taste of jealousy and betrayal twisted his heart at the same time. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 35. Fuck your 35. Cheap favorability, it dropped with just the slightest bit of movement. Bai Weiwei shook her head. Her young and tender face should have carried a few traces of innocence. But she suddenly smiled, revealing a beautiful and sharp smile. She held the knife in one hand while her other hand grabbed onto Fu Beija's clothes and pushed him forward. Fu Beija was pushed by her strength onto the torture platform. He pressed down on the wooden frame and the torture tools on the frame fell to the ground. Wei Wei Bai's knife was pressed against his chest. Her entire body was pressed against him as she used a threatening posture. She raised her eyebrows and looked at him with a beautiful light. "Fu Beija, your brain is full of shit. Everything you see is shit. Me, save him? Can I save him? Who is he to me? I grabbed his gun on the spot and shot at him. But I missed and the bullet brushed past his chest. I didn't kill him and he escaped." Chapter 1044. This also explained why there were bloodstains in her room. She was so angry that the knife was about to pierce through Fu Beija's skin. Fu Beija lowered his head and saw her angry expression. At this moment, he couldn't see any threats. He could only see her beautiful eyes, fierce and resolute. She was like a little demon, and he couldn't wait to die in her anger. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 40. 45, damn, were all men scoundrels? The more impolite she was to him, the faster his favorability would increase. Wei Wei Bai wanted to slap Fu Beija a few times to see if his favorability would increase. Fu Beija was moved, but his face didn't move. Li Xinghe said. Wei Wei Bai curled her lips. "Yo," Li Xinghe said, "you like him to death. Then why are you still with me? You should find Li Xinghe." This was out of line. Fu Beija frowned. "I don't like Uncle Rabbit." Wei Wei Bai shouted angrily, "If you don't like him, why do you believe him? If you don't believe your wife, then believe a man. Although my Bai family doesn't abandon women, if the one who takes the initiative to divorce her husband, then she is worthy of our ancestors." Fu Beija felt that her unreasonable pestering was really spicy. He didn't even feel angry, but he felt his blood rushing. He couldn't wait to bite her lips and see if the taste was also so stimulating. His breathing was a bit hurried. In other words, Li Xinghe stayed in your room before. Why didn't you say so earlier? Wei Weibai felt that his breathing was a bit fast. Was he scared by her knife? Her brain turned quickly, and she casually came up with a reason. What should I say? Who should I tell? You haven't come back yet. Are you going to tell Chenru? That was true. She really had no place to go. When he thought about it, he actually felt pity for her. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 47. Her favorable impression of him was rising like a little vixen. It was really lovable. Wei Weibai pulled a long face and suddenly threw the knife in her hand to the ground. Killing you would dirty my hands. Besides, you didn't catch Li Xinghe, so just say you didn't. You used a fake one to test me. Do you want to be cuckolded that much? Fu Beija's eyes lit up. How do you know that it's fake? Because the small mission had not been issued. Could Wei Weibai say that? She casually made up a story. Didn't you see my knife cut open his clothes? There was no wound at the place where I was shot. Li Xinghe had a bullet wound on his chest other than yours, there was also mine. Of course not. She was just taking a risk. If the man who was hung up and didn't look like Li Xinghe was really Li Xinghe, then Fu Beija would know that she was lying. Because the real Li Xinghe didn't have a wound left by her. But Fu Beija didn't suspect her when she was lying. Then it could only mean that the man hanging up was not Li Xinghe. So Fu Beija was just testing her. In this kind of situation, it depended on whose psychological quality was better. Who would lose their composure first? Wei Weibai thought that she had experienced a lot of situations. She had seen her targets be ghosts, fish or bats. Why would she be afraid of Fu Beija, this insignificant person? Kind. Impossible. As expected, Fu Beija's expression relaxed first. The coldness in his eyes disappeared, leaving behind a surge of heat. He suddenly reached out and gently touched her angry face. My Weiwei is so smart. Other women would be scared out of their wits when they see this kind of situation. Only you can see that something is wrong. Chapter 1045. Wei Weibai twisted her wrist. It seemed that she was still unwilling. Fu Beija smiled. Weiwei, I'm really uncomfortable. Don't provoke me anymore. His breathing was heavy and his body was hot. He had never endured it before. He had vented all his experiences on the battlefield and had never had a woman. So once he had thoughts about a woman, it was like an uncontrollable flood that couldn't be stopped. How could a woman understand a man's feelings? Especially a little girl like Wei Weibai who had no experience, she couldn't understand. That was why she could reject him. No, maybe she didn't like him very much. After all, it was a blind marriage. She abided by the old-fashioned idea of not being abandoned. It wasn't because she liked Fu Beija that she would rather die than give up on the marriage contract. Thinking of this, his chest felt stuffy. He pecked her lips and complained. You're the one who ignited the fire, but you want me to solve it myself. Be careful, I'll go out and find someone else. Wei Weibai sneered. Go ahead. Do you want me to give you a few more concubines? Fu Beija said seriously. No, I'm not that kind of indecent man. I've decided on one. He was also very old-fashioned in this aspect. Wei Weibai pulled back her hand and struggled out from under his body. Then respect my wishes. Don't be like a beast. Her fingers tightened around the tattered clothes. After getting off the bed, she suddenly picked up the vase with one hand and threw it at Fu Beija. Fu Beija reached out and caught it, but he wasn't hurt. She didn't wait for him to get angry. Wei Weibai sneered. Fu Beija, you're really something. You suspected that I was cheating and created such a big show to set me up. In the blink of an eye, you acted like nothing happened and even tried to touch me. You really make me feel disgusted. These words were really hurtful. Wei Weibai didn't care whether the other party would be angry or not. She saw Fu Beija's coat thrown on the ground, so she didn't care whether it was dirty or not. She picked it up, put it on, and walked out. Fu Beija lay on the bed and watched her leave without hesitation. He was really angry. Fu Beija suddenly felt that he had gone too far. This was the first time that young Marshal Fu, who had always gone overboard, was so introspective. Suddenly, he got out of bed and chased after her. However, Wei Weibai's footsteps were very fast. She was already out of the door. He rushed over and saw that under the jacket she was wrapped in, the outline of her calves could be vaguely seen. It was so beautiful. If he had known earlier, he would not have let her wear a cheongsam. She was so beautiful that it made one want to commit a crime. Fu Beija chased the chauffeur out of the car and drove directly in front of Wei Weibai. He saw Wei Weibai's cold expression. Her eyes were so cold that it made people shiver. Although her face was childish, it was indeed scary when she was angry like this. Fu Beija's expression couldn't help but soften. Wei Wei, I'll take you back. It didn't matter that she didn't want to stay. Anyway, she didn't have an affair with Li Xinghe. She didn't betray him. It was reasonable for her to be angry. Fu Beija knew how to be flexible. Wei Weibai didn't like him to be a beast, so he could still pretend to be a gentleman. It wasn't difficult at all. He had seen too many gentlemen. There were even more gentlemen in human skin. Girls always liked this kind of hypocritical gentleman. He looked very decent when he was gentle. Wei Weibai's expression was cold as she hesitated to get in the car. Fu Beija opened the door. Get in the car. I have a bad personality and get dizzy easily. I was wrong just now. You can hit me or scold me, but I won't fight back. Wei Weibai asked tentatively, really? Fu Beija nodded generously. Really? Chapter 1046. Wei Weibai nodded. Stick your head out a little. Fu Beija calmly stuck his head out. In public, he was very sure that Wei Weibai would not do anything to him. After all, she was educated as a lady from a respectable family. No matter how angry she would bear with it and not let him lose face. Just as he was thinking this, Wei Weibai raised her hand and gave him a slap. Fu Beija, Wei Weibai raised her hand and gave him another slap on the other side of his face. She said in disdain, "You're so thick-skinned and you hurt my hand. Can't you eat less?" Fu Beija felt that his face was burning. This was the first time he was slapped in the face. The first time. He was about to lose his temper. Wei Weibai said coldly, "Why? Are you lying even if I hit you?" Indeed, if a man's words can be trusted, even a sow can be blown up a tree. Fu Beija swallowed the anger on his face. He thought about it again. He was the one who said that. He was a man of his word. How could he go back on his words? Fu Beija immediately thought it through. He was no longer angry and quickly put on a cheeky expression. "Do you want to hit me a few more times to vent your anger?" This was not being thick-skinned. This was being shameless. Bai Weiwei had just felt relieved, but in the end, she saw this smelly and shameless face. She was disgusted again. Why didn't this man have any self-esteem? Wei Weibai could not be bothered to be angry with him. Anyway, she had escaped from the devil's clutches. She turned around and walked out of the door. The guard at the door did not stop her. Maybe it was because Fu Beija was following behind her. Fu Beija drove carefully and slowly followed her. Wei Weibai saw a rickshaw and hailed one. She directly told the driver the address. Then, she looked out of the car coldly, completely ignoring Fu Beija. Fu Beija's car followed her car. They followed him all the way to the old mansion. Her eyes were calm, to the extent that it made people forget the immaturity of her appearance. However, Fu Beija would sometimes reveal a sense of loneliness when he looked at her. This feeling of loneliness made him feel that she was very far away from him. The mischievous smile on Fu Beija's face disappeared. He followed her all the way until she got off the rickshaw and entered the old mansion. He looked at her lonely back. His chest felt stuffy for no reason. This was not the kind of yearning that was worse than a beast, but a faint, melancholy, sentimental feeling that was not in line with his character. Was she feeling terrible? Are you very angry? Fu Beija took out a cigarette and took a few puffs before driving back. If he followed them now, Wei Wei Bai would definitely be angry. He suddenly didn't want to make her angry anymore. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 55. He didn't care about himself, but a woman's body was weak and not rough like a man's. Too much anger was not good for the body. Fu Beija had a social gathering. When his ears were hot from drinking, he pulled a brother and said, "If a woman is angry, how can we make her happy?" The brother laughed. "How did you end up like this?" "It's not easy, buying clothes and jewelry for her." Fu Beija unhappily said, "She doesn't like it." The brother said, "But her personality is strange. Why don't you take her to your favorite place and have a heart-to-heart talk with her? With your conditions, you will definitely succeed." Fu Beija knew that this brother's heart-to-heart talk was definitely not serious. However, he was moved by his thoughts. He really liked Wei Wei Bai, so he hoped that she would not be angry with him. After Wei Wei Bai hit Fu Beija, she returned to the old mansion and saw that his favorability had increased again. She felt that she should have hit him a few more times. After a day of turmoil and chaos, Bai Weiwei was also tired. She took a bath, laid down, and directly fell asleep. Before going to bed, she counted with her fingers, counting how many days the system would leave. When she woke up the next day, Chen Ru unexpectedly came to her door and asked her to make clothes. The people here all like to make clothes. Wei Wei Bai followed her, but as soon as she walked out of the door, the sound of a horse's hooves broke the silence of the morning. In the morning light, a handsome man riding a horse suddenly appeared. Wei Wei Bai looked up, but before she could see anything, a hand grabbed her waist, took her on the horse and directly disappeared in front of the door. "Chen Ru," Wei Wei Bai was pressed against Fu Beija's chest and asked in confusion, "What are you doing?" Fu Beija lowered his head, "Taking you out to play." Wei Wei Bai frowned, "Put me down, I don't want to go." Fu Beija sighed, "Seeing that I was busy the whole night, please take pity on me." Wei Wei Bai, "What were you busy with?" Fu Beija was silent for a moment before saying, "I was busy thinking about you. I couldn't sleep the whole night." Chapter 1047. Who else could say such words about Xinyan in such a despicable manner? Wei Wei Bai was held in his arms as they rode the horse all the way to a sentry post in the city. "This is the place where I train." Fu Beija carried her down from the horse. She was still wearing her old-fashioned dress today, so he did not remind her. After all, her Cheongsam was a challenge to his willpower. He was really busy the whole night thinking about her. He thought about the curve of her calves when she walked, and when he tore her Cheongsam on the bed. Fu Beija thought that he was a normal man. At this age, he was still inexperienced. When he found someone pleasing to his eyes, of course he could not suppress his fire, and his fever burned even more at night. But when it came to other women, he was picky and did not like them. After looking around, he still had to go back to Wei Wei Bai's side. Wei Wei Bai saw a house with guns not far away. There were many targets outside the house. Fu Beija led her to the room where the guns were kept and introduced them to her. Wei Wei Bai stared at one of the small guns and did not say anything. Fu Beija smiled and took the gun down. "This is a Browning, it's not big, it's just right for you." As he spoke, he pulled the gun back and loaded it, revealing the barrel. "Have you used a gun before?" Wei Wei Bai shook her head, but she was not like other women who were afraid of these weapons. Instead, her eyes lit up a little. Her bangs scattered in front of her forehead, and her black eyes were very cute. There was no usual coldness, instead, they looked more tender and soft. Fu Beija was tickled by her appearance. He did not know what was cute, but he simply felt that it would be good if Wei Wei Bai rubbed him. Fu Beija put the gun in her hand and said with a smile, "This can kill. If you are angry with me, you can kill me now." Wei Wei Bai carefully held the gun. "If I kill you, your soldiers will kill me." Fu Beija's expression changed. "Who dares? You are my woman. I deserve to die in your hands. No one can touch you." What the hell was a hair? It was too unpleasant to hear. Wei Wei Bai showed a disdainful expression and accidentally put more force into her fingers. The gun in his hands suddenly fired. With a bang, the bullet swept past Fu Beija's hair and hit the roof. Fu Beija felt that his hair was about to burn. He stared at Wei Wei Bai in a daze. Wei Wei Bai also stared at him blankly. Fu Beija suddenly took a few steps forward and pressed down on her fingers to hold her gun. As expected, he felt that her fingers were trembling. His heart softened and his voice became gentle. "Don't be afraid. It's just a misfire. You will be fine after some practice." She had never held a gun before, but he actually let her hold it with the safety off. It was his carelessness that she misfired. Bai Weiwei returned to her senses. She stuffed the pistol into his hand and said calmly, "No need, you play. I'm afraid I won't see you pleasing to the eye and set off the fire again to kill you." Fu Beija did not care and pulled her out. "This is going to be fun. You've never done this before. When I was young, I was so annoyed by those stupid people, so I ran to my father's house to shoot birds with a gun. That feeling was so exhilarating. Now, playing with guns is one of my favorite interests." Wei Wei Bai was pulled by him. Fu Beija giggled and said, "Don't be afraid of misfiring. Who hasn't misfired before? It's a very normal thing. If you kill me, won't you gain a lot? The family business will be yours. You can even take the family business and your virginity and marry a gigolo." Chapter 1048. Wei Wei Bai snorted coldly. "Good waitress, second husband." Fu Beija was touched. "I don't like many of your old-fashioned ideas, but I'm touched by this sentence." Wei Wei Bai said, "But I can let the second husband serve me." Fu Beija's smile immediately disappeared. "You've learned bad things, little Wei Wei." Wei Wei Bai gave a half-smile. "I learned it from you." Fu Beija saw that they had arrived at the target practice area. He pulled the safety pin of the gun and fired. It was a bullseye. He sneered. "I'm not that generous. If you dare to use my money to support a gigolo, I won't be polite." He would kill the man. As for Wei Wei Bai, he would rape her. Bai Weiwei felt that his face was cheap, and that his brain must be thinking of something dirty. Fu Beija held the gun and said to Wei Wei Bai, "Are you afraid of misfiring again? Why don't you play with it?" He wanted her to play with it because he really liked it. Didn't he say that he wanted to give her his favorite thing? There were many things that he liked. He liked himself the most, but it was too early for him to give himself to her. She was not important enough for him to give her everything. So he could only teach her his second and third favorite things. Actually, girls might not really like guns. Many girls were so scared that their legs turned to jelly when they saw these things. When Wei Wei Bai misfired just now, he was afraid that she would be scared to death. But in the end, she was indeed a woman who wanted to enter the Fu family even if she had to die. She was only surprised for a moment, but she was not afraid. This was the first time that Fu Beija looked forward to her learning how to use a gun well. Wei Wei Bai looked at him and did not resist. She took the gun from him and weighed it in her hand. There was a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Fu Beija crossed his arms and looked at her. "Shoot at the target in the distance and see how accurate you are." It was a joke to say that she was accurate. It was already good enough that she could hold the gun well. It was impossible to hit the target. Wei Wei Bai tried to pull off the safety pin. Her movements were clumsy, but she did not hesitate. After she pulled the safety pin, she imitated Fu Beijia and raised her hand to look at the target in front of her. Her eyes were focused and clear. Fu Beijia's unfocused gaze was gradually attracted to her. He wasn't attracted by her appearance or figure. Instead, he was impressed by her temperament. When she stared ahead, her expression was decisive and calm. Even though she looked young and innocent, it didn't detract from the unswerving determination in her eyes. Her appearance was very beautiful. But it wasn't the kind of beauty that made his blood boil. Fu Beijia could not understand this attraction. Was it admiration? Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 57. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. What was this beast thinking about again? She didn't feel comfortable at all seeing his favorability increase. She was just about to shoot. A warm and thick palm gently held her hand, and a tall body pressed against her thin back. His hot breath blew into her ear. You shouldn't hold it like this, you should hold it like this. His fingers seriously corrected the way she held the gun. Then he held her waist with his other hand and said in a low voice, "Relax your fingers. Don't be nervous. Don't look at the target so seriously. Instead, feel the wind. The bullets will be affected differently by the weather. Today's wind is stronger." His words made her slowly relax and her posture also became correct. Fu Beijia revealed a smile and said, "You are a good student." She was about to respond, but he had already said, "Shoot." Crossover system, male god, come over here, crossover system, male god, come over here / crossover system, male god, come over here crossover system, male god, come over here, crossover system, male god, come over here. Chapter 1049. Wei Wei Bai instinctively pulled the trigger and the bullet flew out. She hit the target on the edge. For a person who was shooting at a target for the first time, this was already very good. Fu Beijia said with a smile, "Very good, my Wei Wei is very good." Wei Wei Bai's body was a bit stiff, as if she couldn't believe that she had hit the target so easily. Fu Beijia thought that she was scared and wanted to say a few comforting words to her. Wei Wei Bai turned around and her eyes sparkled. Her lips curved as she revealed a happy smile. "Fu Beijia, I like this." These simple words made Fu Beijia look at her in a daze. It wasn't strange for a man to like this. He liked it very much, but he felt that Wei Wei Bai might not like it. Even if she had such a special personality, a girl wouldn't like to fight and kill. This was determined by gender. But she said that she liked it. Fu Beijia's heart was filled with joy, as if he had found a like-minded friend. It was like she also liked what he liked. This was too good. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 60. Bai Wei Wei listened to the favorability notification, and her smile deepened. Agreeing to a person's interests would increase their favorability by a few points. Moreover, she was telling the truth. In this chaotic world, if she didn't like guns, would she like to torture herself? If she didn't learn how to shoot properly, she wouldn't be able to protect her gold and jewels. Fu Beijia's lips were a bit clumsy. "If you like it, I have many different guns that I can teach you." Wei Wei Bai held the gun in her hand. "I'll learn this first." After all, this gun was quite small, so it was easy to hide it in her bag. She wasn't really going to the battlefield, so how could she carry a gun? Fu Beijia was rarely casual. Learn this first." He immediately corrected her posture and became serious. Even when his temper rose, he would scold her with a cold face. He no longer saw her as a woman. He was completely training the soldiers, and this could not be blamed on Fu Beijia. After all, he was usually very rough when he was training others. He had tried his best to be gentle with Wei Wei Bai, but he still showed his true colors occasionally. Wei Wei Bai didn't mind at all, especially since he was serious and capable in teaching. It was rare for her to find this beast pleasing to the eye. Fu Beijia felt that Wei Wei Bai was really a good student. She actually hit the target without his help. It was still not accurate, but it was already very good. Many people's hands would tremble the first time they held a gun. However, she did not tremble. She was not afraid. Even if her aim was wrong sometimes, it was because she was excited. He understood her excitement. Because she liked it too. The way Fu Beija looked at her changed from gentle to appreciative. A man can like a woman because all kinds of desires are intertwined. But it was hard to appreciate a woman. Admiration was a feeling that would only arise when one was on equal footing, or even looking up to someone. Half a day passed quickly. Fu Beija knew that she could not practice too much, so he confiscated Wei Wei Bai's gun. Looking at her reluctant face, he hesitated for a moment before giving the gun to her. "I'm not here, so I can't practice by myself, but I can give you this gun." Wei Wei Bai revealed a big smile. Fu Beija felt that he was right to give it to her. Her attitude towards him was so good, and she was not angry at all. He was worried and reminded her, "Don't pull the safety. It's okay to hurt others, but don't accidentally hurt yourself." Wei Wei Bai stuffed the gun into her small handbag. "Got it, Instructor Fu. Is at https://www.sashu.com//. Chapter 1050. Fu Beija saw that it was about time, so he pulled her into the car and drove to the restaurant to eat. He told her to eat Western food. It's easy to learn this stuff, but it's not very filling. When I'm doing business with the foreigners, I'm always hungry. Wei Wei Bai, then why are you still eating here? Fu Beija waved his hand for the waiter to serve the food, then said casually, "The desserts here are especially famous. This is the only desserts in the city. You like desserts, right?" All girls like desserts. Even if Wei Wei Bai liked guns, she was different from other girls. But she was still a girl. Wei Wei Bai did not say whether she liked it or not. She just looked at the cutlery and knew that she had to compete with her acting skills again. After all, she was too familiar with these things, and the etiquette of Western food was easy for her. But her character was not. She could only weigh her options and suppress her actions to make herself look clumsy. Fu Beija did not laugh at her at all. Instead, he patiently guided her like an elder. Today, Fu Beija was not a rascal at all, and he rarely showed his ruffian side. Wei Wei Bai felt relieved. When she lowered her head, she did not see that his eyes had softened. It was rare for Fu Beija to teach someone like this. He was usually the most impatient, but every time he taught someone, he was like a demon. In front of her, the demon became Buddha. He was even willing to do it. Fu Beija felt that Wei Wei Bai was definitely made of water. She could make him gentler. Fu Beija not only taught her how to eat Western food, but also how to drink wine. There was a type of grape that he liked very much, so he specially introduced it to her. Seeing that she liked it, he could not help but feel happy. For the first time, he wanted a woman to understand him and like him a little. This feeling was very strange. Fu Beija did not resist. After the main course, the desserts were served. Fu Beija did not like to eat, so he watched Wei Wei Bai eat. She ate in small bites and was very elegant. As a child raised by a noble family, she still had her foundation even when she was down and out. Fu Beija watched her eat. Her lips were stained with white cream, and his mouth suddenly felt dry. Wei Wei Bai thought it was delicious and couldn't help but say, "When I was young, I liked sweet things very much. My mother made osmanthus cake for me, and it tasted very much like this." Fu Beija's voice was gentle. "You must have been very fat when you were young, and you had cavities." Wei Wei Bai glared at him. "You're the one with decayed teeth." Fu Beija immediately opened his mouth wide, showing her his healthy white teeth. "I have never had tooth decay, look at how beautiful my teeth are." He was serious for no more than 3 seconds. Wei Wei Bai immediately stepped back. "Don't come over. You're disgusting." Fu Beija said, "If you're so disgusted, why did you marry me?" Wei Weibai took small bites of dessert and said without thinking, "Isn't it because of the marriage contract?" When this big truth came out, the atmosphere was a little cold. The smile on Fu Beija's face disappeared, and his eyes were even a little gloomy. Their harmonious relationship could not withstand a simple sentence from her to shatter it. Fu Beija already knew about it, but when she said it again today, he couldn't accept it. His breathing became heavier, and he revealed a smile, but it was not very natural. "If there wasn't the marriage contract, you definitely wouldn't want to marry me." Wei Weibai looked at his gloomy face and suddenly had no appetite. She pushed the plate away and took a handkerchief to wipe her lips. Her lips were bright red and stained with sweetness. Fu Beija's eyes deepened. She said softly, "Fu Beija, I don't want to lie to you. Marrying you is a marriage contract, and saying how much I like you is a lie." Who asked the system not to let them be childhood sweethearts? Even if she said that she liked him now, would he believe her? Wei Weibai had no choice but to tell him the truth. Fu Beija was silent for a moment before revealing a teasing smile. "I knew it long ago. I also know that although you look old-fashioned, your heart must be hoping for me to die early so that you can live a peaceful life." Wei Weibai frowned and raised her eyebrows. Her eyes were cold. "How can you say that? Can I hope for my man to die? Husband and wife can go through thick and thin together. Even if we don't like each other, we can still make do with it for the rest of our lives." Fu Beija should be happy that she didn't abandon him. He should be angry that she didn't like him so directly. Suddenly, Fu Beija's expression changed, and he flipped the table and pounced on Wei Weibai. Bullets came in from outside the window. Fu Beija immediately took out his gun and shot out of the window, and took the opportunity to push Wei Weibai out. "There's a back door, you run first. Don't think of staying to save me, you're not capable enough, you can only delay." Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong. Why was his hand empty? He looked up. Wei Weibai had already turned around and ran. There was no need for him to chase her. What happened to going through thick and thin together? What happened to the love between husband and wife? She abandoned him just like that and ran away on her own. A gust of cold wind blew past and Fu Beija felt his heart turn cold. Slash. Chapter 1051. There was not only one assassin outside the window, but a group of them. Wei Weibai had just run a few steps when she had no choice but to lie down to avoid the bullets. She turned around and saw Fu Beija, who was hiding under the window and fighting back. His face was cold and serious, without a trace of his usual carefree attitude. The glass shards hit his head, and his black hair was covered with fine glass shards, emitting a dazzling light. Fu Beija had brought people, but not many, only a few bodyguards. They would not be able to hold on for long. Wei Weibai's call for help did not respond, so she quickly scanned the surroundings. Then, under the cover of Fu Beija, she secretly ran to the back door. When she opened the back door, she saw Fu Beija looking back at her worriedly. He also used his body to block her escape route, so that the bullets would not hit her. That self-sacrificing look, that look in his eyes, was like that of a loyal dog that was abandoned. Wei Weibai felt that she was a scumbag. She originally wanted to give him a comforting look or something. After all, it was not easy to increase his favorability. She had to go through a lot to increase his favorability. This kind of scene where he was being assassinated was the most suitable to increase his favorability. But before she could give him a flirtatious look or something, a bullet swept past her feet. She immediately retreated a few steps and ran out of the door. She was even more of a scumbag. In Fu Beija's eyes, she was probably a person who would kick him away at the critical moment to escape. Yes, she was indeed a scumbag. Wei Weibai ran out of the back door, only then did she realize that she was too naive. The back door was also sealed, and a few cars with people were outside at the same time. When they saw her rushing out, they did not hesitate to raise their guns. Without the system, she did not have a life guarantee, and did not have any means to save her life. At this moment, Wei Wei Bai clearly felt the feeling of death. She was about to take the risk of being hit by the bullets and return to the restaurant. A strong hand grabbed her arm. Wei Wei Bai was shocked and turned her head, only to see a familiar face. Li Xinghe. Li Xinghe was wearing the low-key clothes of a rickshaw driver, a tattered hat, and yellow wax paint on his face. He looked like a beggar on the street. Was he in disguise to follow Fu Beija? Wei Wei Bai was right. Li Xinghe was indeed following Fu Beija. Upon his successful return to the south, he found that his father was dead. But for him to smoothly gain power and consolidate his position as heir, everyone hid this secret and kept the governor's corpse in ice. As soon as Li Xinghe returned and cried bitterly, he immediately calmed down and began to accept power. After a series of games, he finally stabilized his position. And if he wanted to completely consolidate his position, then he must kill Fu Beija. This was because his father's death was absolutely irreconcilable. If he, as a son, could not even take revenge for this, then how could he convince the masses? This was also the reason why he went to the north again and planned another assassination. Wei Wei Bai did not have a database, so she did not know Li Xinghe's twists and turns. She did not see any small missions issued. She directly shook off Li Xinghe's hand and frowned. "It's you?" Li Xinghe revealed a bitter smile. "If I knew you were here, I wouldn't have let them shoot." Wei Wei Bai grasped the small bag in her hand and looked at him expressionlessly. "Why did you come back again? Aren't you afraid Fu Beija will kill you?" Li Xinghe's eyes became gentle. "Right now I'm the one killing him, not the other way around. You go first, there's a car there that can take you to a safe place. Now is the critical moment of the battle, you will be affected if you stay here." Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 1052. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment. "Are you really going to kill Fu Beija?" Li Xinghe was silent. He looked at her deeply and finally said, "If I want to kill him, will you be willing?" This question was unreasonable. But it was very important to Li Xinghe, because her answer would affect whether she liked Fu Beija or not. He didn't mind that she was married before, but he cared very much if she gave her heart to Fu Beija. Wei Wei Bai didn't answer. She even looked a little dazed. Li Xinghe sighed. He felt that this was already a very good answer. She still didn't know her own feelings. This meant that he still had a chance. Li Xinghe pulled her and stuffed her into the car. "Hurry up and leave." Wei Wei Bai saw that there was only one driver. She didn't go to the back seat. Instead, she went directly to the front passenger seat. Li Xinghe felt that it was strange, but he didn't think too much about it. After Wei Wei Bai got into the car, she suddenly looked up at him. "Li Xinghe, I've thought it through. I don't want Fu Beija to be killed by you. No matter what reason we have, since we're married, I won't abandon him." Her words were like a sharp knife stabbing into his heart. Li Xinghe's face turned pale. Even the waxy yellow paint couldn't hide his discomfort. He gritted his teeth. "But you can't do anything. Fu Beija will die soon. He won't be able to escape this assassination." After saying that, Li Xinghe turned around and shouted, "Increase the firepower, kill him for me." His voice trembled as he roared. It sounded like he was extremely sad. Wei Wei Bai took out a gun and immediately pointed it at the driver's head. "Get out of here," she said viciously. Li Xinghe was shocked and immediately turned around, but he saw Wei Wei Bai with a white face, holding a gun. and her eyes were cold. He had never seen her like this before. He had seen her most resolute when she had jumped off the train. At that time, she had been so beautiful. But now, she seemed to be glowing. Her eyes were cold, but the way she held the gun was beautiful. Li Xinghe felt angry, but he couldn't do anything to her. He said, "Wei Wei, don't go back to save him. The driver won't get out of the car even if you kill him." Wei Wei Bai sneered, then beat him to death. She did not have the time to waste here. If Fu Beija died, her mission would be over. How could side quests get in the way of main quests? Did he want to die? She knocked the driver's head hard with the gun in her hand. Then, she grabbed the bloody driver with one hand, opened the door, and kicked the driver out. She held the gun and quickly sat in the driver's seat. Li Xinghe was stunned by her nimble movements. He had always thought that Wei Wei Bai was a woman raised in a boudoir. Even if she wasn't a Chinese daughter flower, she was still a Chinese rose flower, cold but still gentle. But today, she was like a tyrant bandit. Li Xinghe advised, "Wei Wei, you don't know how to drive, get out." If it wasn't for the fact that she was afraid of future side quests, she really wanted to roll her eyes at Li Xinghe. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but sneer, "Scram, Li Xinghe." As she spoke, she put her hand on the steering wheel and stepped on the accelerator. Li Xinghe didn't believe that she knew how to drive. Even if he saw her move nimbly, he didn't believe that she would run him over. Suddenly, the car made an ear-piercing rumbling sound. Like a yak, it rushed directly towards Li Xinghe. Li Xinghe was stunned for a moment, but his body had already instinctively thrown to the side. He rolled into the mud, and Bai Weiwei sped past him in the car. "Crossover system, my idol, come here. Crossover system, my idol, come here, / crossover system, my idol, come here. Crossover system, my idol, come here. Crossover system, my idol, come here." Chapter 1053. Li Xinghe sat in the pit in a daze, like he was driving a rickshaw. He suddenly said, "Fu Beija, you've led Wei Wei astray." She was clearly such a gentle and beautiful girl, but she suddenly became so violent. It must have been that violent soldier who led her astray. Wei Wei Bai drove the car. When she rushed over, she just happened to be in the middle of the fight between the two groups of people. Bullets flew through the window and she leaned over the steering wheel, shattering all the glass on her body. Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and endured. She turned the steering wheel and stepped on the gas pedal to crash into the restaurant's door. She hoped that Fu Beija would dodge quickly, otherwise it would be an injustice if he was killed by her. The car hit the counter and stopped. Wei Wei Bai was shocked by the impact and she almost spat out blood. Then she opened the door and saw Fu Beija looking at her in disbelief. Wei Wei Bai endured the pain and shouted, "Come up, Fu Beija." Fu Beija's angry face showed a bit of emotion. He gritted his teeth and said, "Wei Wei Bai, you're simply too stupid. She actually dared to come here. Didn't he tell her to run? Why did she come back? A woman seeking death." He didn't know what kind of emotion his heart was feeling. When Fu Beija saw her, he just wanted to vent his discomfort. Or it could be called being moved. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 65. Wei Wei Bai's little face had a kind of crystal-like white and her black eyes had a cold light. "If you want to die, then continue to curse me." Her appearance was simply despicable. But it was very beautiful. Fu Beija admitted for the first time that a woman's beauty could actually kill. He suddenly rushed into the car. Before the door was closed, Wei Wei Bai quickly drove the car backwards and then rushed out. A hail of bullets rained down, riddling the car with holes. When Wei Wei Bai rushed out, she felt a pain in her arm. The bullet had brushed past her flesh. She endured the pain and didn't make a sound. She stepped on the accelerator and fled. After reloading, Fu Beija stuck his head out of the window and killed several assassins who were chasing after him. The car drove all the way to Fu Beija's practice area. This place, which was filled with guns and sentries, was Fu Beija's base camp. As soon as she stopped the car, the sentries rushed over. The assassins didn't dare to chase after him either. Instead, they fled in all directions. Fu Beija ran out of ammunition. He let out a sigh of relief and turned to look at Wei Wei Bai. But what he saw was a scene that made his heart and soul shatter. Wei Wei Bai lay limply on the steering wheel. The blood on her arm had soaked her clothes and was dripping down the car. She frowned. Her small face was pale and her whole body was trembling. Fu Beija's body froze for a second. He even held his breath. He had seen too many dead people. He would never be moved by a dead person. This was the first time he felt such a tidal wave of panic that completely drowned him. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai groaned in pain. The moan woke Fu Beija up with a start. She wasn't dead yet. Fu Beija's eyes were red. He immediately got out of the car and quickly opened the door. He carefully carried Wei Wei Bai out and shouted to the bodyguards, "Call the doctor." The doctor came and was relieved after seeing her. "It's just a superficial wound. The bullet didn't stay in the body. But there's too much blood. You need a blood transfusion to suture it." Fu Beija immediately said, "Stop the bleeding first. Let's go to the hospital." It was not safe for these operations here. There was an operating theater in the hospital. A clean operating theater would reduce the chances of the patient getting infected. Chapter 1054. He hurriedly carried the bandaged Wei Wei Bai to the hospital. Along the way, Wei Wei Bai curled up in his arms and trembled non-stop. "Fu Beija, I'm cold." Fu Beija felt as if his chest was being hammered by a huge rock. His lips trembled as he wrapped his coat tightly around her. "You're not cold. I'm hugging you." His heart ached. He was a big man with rough skin and thick flesh. How could the bullet be so blind as to hit by Wei Wei? Why didn't he hit him? Her body was so petite and weak. How could she withstand being hit by a bullet? A woman's body was fundamentally different from a man's. Their physiques were even more different. When he was hit by a bullet, he was still alive and kicking even after a few days. But a woman was hit by a bullet and could die at any time. Even if she was saved, her body would be weak and it might even leave behind a permanent illness. Fu Beija was extremely anxious. When they arrived at the hospital, Wei Wei Bai was sent to the operating theater. The doctor said, "There's not enough blood. We need to go to the next city to get more." Fu Beija frowned. "I brought dozens of soldiers. Check their blood type and draw my soldiers directly." The doctor did not dare to offend him and immediately nodded. "Okay, let them line up first. I'll check their blood type." Fu Beija stretched out his arm. "Check mine first." The doctor hesitated for a moment. Fu Beija was already furious. "Hurry up, or I'll tear down your hospital and hang you up as a target." The doctor was almost scared to tears by his bully look. He immediately checked Fu Beija's blood type and found that it was the same as Wei Wei Bai's. Blood could be transfused. Fu Beija immediately heaved a sigh of relief. When he was transfusing blood for Wei Wei Bai, he sat by the side and stared blankly at Wei Wei Bai lying on the hospital bed with a pale face. Her body was petite, and even though she was lying on the bed, she still couldn't occupy the small single bed. Fu Beija watched as his blood slowly entered her body. His chest felt suffocated. He thought of how Wei Wei Bai had rushed into the restaurant in her car. Did he want to die? She was always giving him surprises. She actually knew how to drive and even came back to save him. When the surgery was completed, the doctor announced that the patient was safe. Fu Beija, who had been sitting at the side, finally let out a sigh of relief. However, he was unable to let out the discomfort in his chest. Fu Beija held her hand. It was soft and cold. He said softly, "Didn't you dislike me?" If I die, shouldn't you be rejoicing that you're free from this blind marriage? Why did you save me? Wasn't he also testing her all this time? There were all kinds of teasing and rudeness, all kinds of shameless approaches and threats. He just wanted to get back at them. To enter the school, she insisted on marrying him despite his bullets. When he was being ridiculed by the whole city, he couldn't help but play tricks on her whenever he saw her, making her regret marrying him. He was so petty and unreasonable. Aren't you forcing me to repay you with my body? Fu Beija hooked her finger and said softly, you saved me. I have nothing to repay you with. Only this body is heavy enough to warm your bed. At this point, Fu Beija finally knew how to smile embarrassedly. After smiling, he looked up and bumped into a pair of black and pure eyes. Wei Wei Bai woke up. She frowned and looked at the ceiling in a daze. Fu Beija was surprised and happy at the same time. He said, you're awake. Do you still feel uncomfortable? Wei Wei Bai turned her head to look at him with difficulty. The corners of her mouth twitched, and she was indescribably awkward. She was so awkward that she was about to cry. Chapter 1055. The small mission above her head finally appeared. It was so strange that she wanted to bang her head against the wall. Childhood Sweetheart heartwarming mission activated. Childhood Sweetheart is sad and desperate because of your lack of freedom in marriage. Childhood Sweetheart, please use a reasonable reason to request a divorce. Countdown of 10 minutes. Forget about asking for a divorce. What reasonable reason? What is a reasonable reason? Is not a reasonable reason if I don't love you? She thought about it for a while and finally tried to complete the mission. Bai Weiwei opened her mouth, her eyebrows tinged with worry. Fu Beija, I have something to say to you. Fu Beija immediately held her hand tightly. What do you need? Do you need to go to the toilet or are you thirsty? Bai Weiwei was choked by his words, and the emotions she had been brewing disappeared. She took a long time before she looked down. I saved you. You owe me a life, right? Fu Beija laughed softly. Is this why you are in such a hurry to talk? I do owe you a life. Wei Wei Bai turned to look at him with a calm expression. Do you know how our marriage came about? Fu Beija was silent. He really did not ask because at that time, he did not care about this marriage at all. He had been thinking about when he could break off the engagement. Wei Wei Bai smiled. That's true. That happened so long ago. Even I heard it from my grandmother. That year, your grandfather saved my father's life. That's why our families are so close. Later on, we decided on our marriage. Fu Beija's expression became gentler. Isn't this our fate? We were supposed to be together. That's why we had this engagement. Wei Wei Bai just looked at him. Her eyes were calm and had a hint of worry. Finally, she said, before my grandmother died, she held my hand tightly and asked me to go to your house to repay her kindness. That's why I have to marry you, Fu Beija. Fu Beija repeated, repay a favor. She wanted to enter his house even if she had to die, not just to abide by the marriage contract. It was because she wanted to repay a debt of gratitude. Wei Wei Bai continued, she also made me swear that if I broke off the engagement, would die a horrible death. Fu Beija's expression changed, ruthlessness crept into his eyes as he fiercely said, how could she make you swear such a poisonous oath, that old B***tch? Wei Wei Bai frowned. Don't talk nonsense about my elders. Fu Beija, you don't understand the thoughts of the older generation. You should return the favor and abide by the engagement. Fu Beija tugged at his collar uncomfortably and sneered, I don't understand these things. I only know how wronged you are. Wasn't she being forced to marry him? What kind of mentality did she have at that time to marry him? And on their wedding day, he still treated her that way. His heart was filled with bitterness and pity, which simply made him restless. Wei Wei Bai stared at him in a daze for a while before giving a bitter smile. I am wronged, very wronged. Fu Beija's eyes became wet. He pursed his lips in silence for a while before saying, I won't let you feel wronged in the future. His heartache came without warning. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 68. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while. Her eyes were filled with tears as she finally said, Fu Beija, can we divorce? Look, I've already paid you with my life, then I can redeem my father's life. I know that you feel wronged and I don't want to delay you, but I don't want to die a horrible death. Fu Beija couldn't understand her words for a while. But looking at her, her beautiful eyes were filled with grievance. I'm not breaking the contract. I've already saved you, so my grandmother won't let the oath come true. He should be angry. She didn't want him and wanted a divorce. But why was it that when he saw her crying eyes, his heart was filled with pain? Fu Beija suddenly bent down and kissed her lips. He said in a low voice, Wei Wei, you saved me, so I'm willing to suffer for you for a lifetime. Wei Wei Bai, but I don't want to suffer for a lifetime. She didn't say this as she saw the small quest notification. The favorability notification also came. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 70. Wei Wei Bai smiled before closing her eyes in exhaustion and falling asleep. Transmigration system, male god, come here. 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 Transmigration system, male god, come here, comma. Chapter 1056. Fu Beija sat beside her in a daze and looked at Wei Wei Bai, who was still smiling bitterly even though she was in deep sleep. He finally knew why she wanted to marry him even at the cost of her life. He thought that Wei Wei Bai was just pedantic and old-fashioned. She didn't want to bear the burden of breaking off the engagement and would rather have a marriage without feelings. He didn't expect that her courage was forced by the old-fashioned and pedantic elders in her family. He had seen examples of women being forced to death by their elders in the family. There were even places where the customs were particularly feudal. If a woman didn't marry according to the wishes of her parents, she would be directly tied to the bridal sedan chair. More often than not, she was brainwashed to do whatever her parents told her to do. He didn't expect that Wei Wei Bai was also one of the victims. She actually didn't want to marry him. Just like him, he didn't like a woman who he had never met. It was rare for Fu Beija to empathize with another person's life. When she first entered the family, she was in despair. She was forced to make a vow, but when she was about to enter the family, she was greeted by his bullets. Even so, when he was assassinated, she still risked her life to drive into the restaurant to save him. Driving, how did she know how to drive? Fu Beija thought about it and felt that the Bai family had some family background before they fell. Even if they were really in dire straits, they wouldn't have fallen to the bottom. Perhaps the elders in the family taught her how to drive. Fu Beija didn't think too much about it, especially when Wei Wei Bai was still lying on the hospital bed. A bodyguard came over and whispered, "Young Marshal, we caught a few assassins." Fu Beija revealed a trace of murderous intent and his eyes were extremely cold. "Force a confession out of them first. Don't kill them. I'll go personally when I'm free." This time, the assassination was fierce. It must be the group of people in the south. Li Xinghe was definitely involved. Last time, a bullet couldn't kill him. This time, he wouldn't give up until he left Li Xinghe's body in the north. Wei Wei Bai's wound needed to be observed in the hospital. Fu Beija accompanied her as she busied herself. He even asked someone to make chicken soup and brought it over. Then, he fed it to Wei Wei Bai. "Your hand is injured, so you can't move. I'll be your hand for the time being." Fu Beija said it calmly. Even the corny words did not sound corny. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips and didn't say anything. She just looked straight at him, as if she was observing his reaction. Of course, Fu Beija knew what she was thinking. He scooped a spoonful of chicken soup and said gently, "Drink it." Looking at the chicken soup that was about to reach her mouth, she frowned. Fu Beija teased, "How many people want my gentleness? I'm giving you some of my gentleness. Are you happy?" This gentleness was something that he had painstakingly squeezed out. After all, he had no experience in coaxing people. She didn't know how a man could be considered gentle and courteous to the girl he liked. He had never been a gentleman. If he could solve it crudely, he would never drag it out. It was rare for him to be so careful when it came to relationships. Wei Wei Bai didn't say anything, but she gently held the spoon and drank the chicken soup. It was a cute action. Fu Beija continued to feed her. "Eat more. You're too skinny. You can't be too skinny. Otherwise, you won't be able to resist hunger and your body won't be well." Wei Wei Bai looked at him lightly and asked in a low voice, "Have you considered it?" Fu Beija laughed, "You still remember what you said just now? You've already entered my house and you still want to walk out. I've said it before, why don't you not enter my house? Once you enter my house, you won't be able to leave." Wei Wei Bai was a little anxious. "Didn't you say that we can still get a divorce?" Transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here and read the at https://www.sashu.com/transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here and read at https://www.sashu.com/transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here and read at https://www.sashu.com transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here and read at https://m/sashu.com transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here. Chapter 1057. Fu Beija thought of the free marriage notice that was posted all over the city. He really wanted to get someone to tear it down. Fortunately, he was thick-skinned and did not feel that going back on his words was a bad thing. "Yes, I can get a divorce, but I won't." Wei Wei Bai was puzzled. "Why? You don't like me very much." The gentleness on Fu Beija's face gradually disappeared. "Why do you think so?" "At first, I didn't like you. After all, how much can I have feelings for a woman I haven't met before? But it's different now." "Wei Wei Bai, how is it different?" Fu Beija smiled, leaned over and quickly kissed her on the lips. Wei Wei Bai immediately covered her mouth and stared at him with a frown. Fu Beija really liked this shy look of hers. "That's the difference. I'm not casual with women, but I'm casual with you. Isn't it because I like you?" He was not shy. If he liked her, he liked her. There was nothing that could not be said. He was so annoyed by those scholars and poets. They did not say anything when they liked someone, but they were so shy and wrote love letters. It was so sour. He was even more disgusted by those men who hid their feelings in their hearts. They were like a little daughter-in-law, making people laugh. If he, Fu Beija, liked a woman, he would announce it out loud. "I like you. How can I feel that being with you is torture?" Wei Wei Bai's face was red. There were traces of tears in her black eyes, which were sparkling and clear. Fu Beija was a little embarrassed when she looked at him. He said, "Okay, I know you are very surprised. Don't mention divorce in the future. I'm a very good partner. I don't go out and fool around. I'm not picky about my food. I can sleep on the floor. Also, I'm hardworking and eager to learn. You can't find anyone like me in 10 miles. You should be happy that you married a good man who can let you eat and dress well." He was very practical. Although he seemed a little unreliable on normal days. But he knew how good he was. He was so good, and he liked her. She would definitely be happy for the rest of her life. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. Was this another type of narcissism? She asked hesitantly, "Do you really like me?" Fu Beija said calmly, "Yes, I like it." His tone was flat, as if he was saying that the weather was good. Wei Wei Bai was about to say something when he stuffed a spoonful of soup into her mouth. "All right, don't ask so many questions. What are you thinking about every day with that little head of yours? If I really want to divorce you, I have plenty of ways. Why do I need you to rack your brains? Eat and don't talk." Wei Wei Bai didn't have time to say anything. This was because Fu Beija was feeding her and did not give her a chance to nag. The atmosphere between the two of them was unusually calm, with a hint of sweetness. However, Fu Beija deliberately ignored Wei Wei Bai's intentions. For example, she didn't like him very much. Also, she actually wanted a divorce. She was still a little old-fashioned and traditional, so she would still stay by his side even if he didn't agree to the divorce. Therefore, Fu Beija was not very worried about this problem. It was a lifetime, so she would definitely like him. Otherwise, who else could she like? Wei Wei Bai stayed in the hospital for a few days. When she felt better, she was discharged. On the day she was discharged, Fu Beija drove her back to the old mansion. When they arrived at the old mansion, they found that there were already a few more cars in front of the old mansion. They were all Fu Beija's men. "I'm here to pack your things." Wei Wei Bai looked at him strangely. "What are you packing?" Fu Beija raised his eyebrows and looked at her. "Of course they're your things. You'll live with me in the future. You don't have to come back." Transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Download the full text. Transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it. If you like Transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Chapter 1058. Before Wei Wei Bai could answer, Chenru had already rushed out with a group of people. "Wei Wei, I heard that you're going to the city." The old mansion was located in the suburbs, in the center of the city where Fu Beija lived. Chenru's face was cold, and she didn't put on an amiable expression. She still wanted Wei Wei Bai to stay in the old mansion so that Fu Beija could go home. She thought that Wei Wei Bai was useless and couldn't keep Fu Beija. In the end, unexpectedly, Fu Beija was really tempted. Chenru really wanted to look up and laugh. The people that she tried so hard to arrange could actually win over Fu Beija. As long as Wei Wei Bai was in the old mansion, Fu Beija would definitely come back. But today, a group of soldiers rushed in and said that they wanted to pack up Wei Wei Bai's things and live in the city. So was she drawing water with a bamboo basket? Wei Wei Bai just got out of the car and didn't say anything when she saw Chenru's expression. Fu Beija glanced at her indifferently, then reached out and grabbed Wei Wei Bai's shoulder, ignoring Chenru, and walked into the mansion. There was even some hostility in his eyes. It was as if Chenru was an enemy who came to steal Wei Wei Bai. Fu Beija said to Wei Wei Bai while walking, "Chenru is not a good person, don't believe her." "Although I'm not a good person, I'm definitely sincere to you." Sincerity with 70 favorability. It was indeed very high for a man. Although 70 wasn't unique. Wei Wei Bai said, "Do you need to move out in such a hurry?" This was similar to kidnapping. Fu Beija came to the front hall, then pulled her to sit down and asked someone to serve tea. He sneered, "There are so many dirty things in this mansion, I don't want you to stay here." Wei Wei Bai actually felt that moving out would be better for the strategy. Just as she was about to answer, a small mission appeared above her head. "Please return to your room. What was up with Xiao Sa's arrow?" Was this a map to guide her back to her room? Wei Wei Bai didn't have a good impression of the cute mission sent by the main system at all. What a crazy big boss. The most annoying main system in history. Bai Weiwei got up and said to Fu Beija, "You let your soldiers come and move things. Don't think about how many private things a girl has, how can you show them?" Fu Beija didn't think so much. After all, they could just move the entire wardrobe away. The entire dressing table was also taken away. How could she really let those rough men handle her things? But Wei Wei Bai was not reassured. Wei Wei Bai Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai Lu Wei Wei. Wei 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 Wei, Wei 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 Wei. Wei 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 Wei. Wei 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 Wei. He was already very happy. Wei Wei Bai nodded and turned to leave. The arrow followed her and kept urging her to return to her room. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw Fu Beija following her. Bai Weiwei stopped in her tracks and looked at him calmly. Fu Beija didn't feel embarrassed at all. I feel that I should go and help. Those maidservants are not clean. I definitely won't steal your things. Weiwei Bai looked at him suspiciously. She looked like she was looking at a perverted stalker. Fu Beija was a little embarrassed when she saw that. Weiwei Bai didn't care and continued to walk forward. Do as you wish. Fu Beija immediately followed her. Her arm hadn't recovered yet, so she couldn't use too much strength to avoid reopening the wound. Fu Beija was really worried about her and didn't want to see what her personal items looked like. Chapter 1059. Weiwei Bai followed the arrow and returned to the room. The soldiers had not come in yet. Fu Beija also stepped into the room. He did not come here often. The decoration of the room was still old-fashioned, but the furnishings were elegant and fresh. The wooden table and chairs were placed by the window. There was a vase on the table. There was a withered branch in the vase. It was bony, cold and elegant. On the dressing table, there were only a few bottles of feminine perfume. It was so little that it was pitiful. Fu Beija then remembered that Weiwei Bai did not wear much jewelry. She did not have a good life. Fu Beija's heart clenched. Weiwei Bai did not pay attention to Fu Beija. She took a bag and put the things on the dressing table into it. Then she went to the wardrobe as if nothing had happened. The small task on top of her head had become. Please gently open the wardrobe. There is a surprise package in the wardrobe. What was in the wardrobe? It should be a surprise package. The main system had never given her a reliable surprise before. Weiwei Bai became vigilant. She suddenly realized that she could not open the wardrobe. What if something inhuman came out of it? What if Fu Beija saw it? Weiwei Bai pondered for a moment and suddenly turned to look at Fu Beija. Fu Beija stood by the table. The dried twigs accentuated his cold and hard face, making him look even more handsome. He was playing with a lighter leisurely. He was still holding a cigarette in his hand, but he did not light it. Why, you're done. Fu Beija looked at her and could not help but reveal a smile. Weiwei Bai shook her head. I just feel that I can't finish today. Moreover, my wound has not healed, and I can't sleep on the bed. If I go with you today, I will not be able to sleep or rest for several nights. Fu Beija's expression did not change, but his eyes darkened. He thought for a moment, then shook his head. I don't feel at ease leaving you here. Weiwei Bai smiled. Why? Are you afraid that I'll be eaten up by this place? I've been here for a long time and I'm fine. Fu Beija looked at her bright and beautiful smile, and his eyes softened a little. He lit the cigarette and said in a low voice, It's different. You had no value in the past, but now you do. Weiwei Bai looked a little confused, as if she didn't understand what his value was. Fu Beija also knew that she did not understand. After all, she had just married into the family not long ago. He said calmly, My father is not a reliable person. He likes that woman, Chenru, so he married her. That woman is also very powerful. She took advantage of the fact that I was fighting on the battlefield to win over the elders of the Fu family and put pressure on me. Weiwei Bai, put pressure on you? Fu Beija nodded. Yes, because my father happened to be seriously ill, Chenru took care of him every day. After serving my father well, she got half of a military order. This military order is very powerful, and it can mobilize half of the soldiers in my family. This was incredible. The soldiers of the Fu family had been led by General Fu and Fu Beija for 2 generations. Almost all of them were brave and good at war, and all of them were elite soldiers. This was the foundation of Fu Beija's standing in this chaotic era, and was able to compete with the South. Fu Beija saw Wei Wei Bai frown and knew that she had immediately figured out the power of the military order. What a smart girl. Fu Beija said with a smile, "Don't be afraid, she can't use this military order. My father has a will that says that she can only use it if she meets some conditions." Wei Wei Bai asked curiously, "What conditions?" Fu Beija's voice turned cold. "Children." Wei Wei Bai repeated doubtfully, "Children?" Chapter 1060. Fu Beija said, if Chen Ru had a son, she would be able to use it. But she didn't, and my father didn't make it very clear in his will. So, Chen Ru convinced the elders that as long as there is a new child in the Fu family, even if it's a grandson, it's fine. The military order was very important. He had never believed that Chen Ru could use it. Because Chen Ru didn't leave behind a child, and his father died too soon. She didn't have time to cheat on Marshal Fu and give birth to a fake one. The will said that if Chen Ru had a successor of the Fu family, she could use it. This military order was not for her. It was for her descendants. Marshal Fu's original intention was to protect her child. After all, Marshal Fu thought that he was in good health. If Chen Ru was pregnant, he would die. Then Chen Ru and his child would be at risk. But unexpectedly, Marshal Fu died after the will was made. Chen Ru didn't have a child, so the military order was useless. That was why Chen Ru turned her attention to Fu Beija. Fu Beija stared at Wei Wei Bai's belly. "You are Chen Ru," the woman acknowledged by the elders of the Fu family. "They were so eager to let you in because they wanted you to give birth to my child." Wei Wei Bai was confused by his family's entanglement. She asked curiously, "Even if we have a child, what does it have to do with Chen Ru?" Fu Beija smiled. "Idiot, you have my child. Chen Ru is my stepmother, so the child in your belly is her grandson. When the child is born, she can take it away from you, and then the will can be used. Who said that only sons had the right to inherit? Grandchildren also had rights. And grandchildren were easier to control." Wei Wei Bai's face was a little ugly. She instinctively reached out to cover her belly. "She can't take my child away. I won't let her succeed." Fu Beija looked at her belly and his eyes softened. "Her purpose is to kill me. As long as you have a child, I have no value. Then, when you give birth, they will take the opportunity to take away your child and kill you." Wei Wei Bai said coldly, "She dares." These words were cold and domineering. Fu Beija actually felt excited and didn't feel that what she said was unladylike. His smile deepened. "She dares, but she can't beat me. I'll wait for her to court death a few more times, then I'll deal with her with interest." Other women were completely uninterested in what he was saying. They were only interested in a life of luxury, clothes, and jewelry. Only Wei Wei Bai understood him. She could follow his thoughts no matter what he said. It was easy to find a woman who was beautiful and gentle. But a girl who understood him, was as courageous as him, and was even more courageous than him. It was a treasure. It was something that could only be discovered but not sought. The diamond hidden in the yellow sand shone brightly. And this ray of light was seen by him. Fu Beija could only feel his heart beating faster and his blood boiling. After meeting her, he felt that the rest of the female fans were just female fans. Only she was his confidante. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips, her expression cold. Her black eyes were deep, and she snorted coldly. "Stupid evil woman, do you think I'm easy to bully? If I have a child, I won't let anyone hurt him. You don't have to worry about me, I'm not the kind of person who doesn't fight back when bullied." He believed her words. She held a grudge. He knew that if it wasn't for the marriage contract, she might have wanted to take revenge on him for those few shots back then. He really liked this kind of Wei Bai. Chapter 1061. Wei Bai turned around and put the bag on the chair. Her hair was a little loose, but she didn't think much of it. She took out the hairpin and her black hair fell down. It was beautiful and smooth as it draped over her back, making her look even more slender. Wei Bai lowered her head and didn't notice Fu Beija behind her. Her voice softened. "You can go back first, Fu Beija. I want to rest." Just as she finished speaking, the man behind her had already leaned over. He still had the smell of cigarettes on him, mixed with the coldness of late autumn, and had a chilling sense of invasion. He pressed his face against her hair and said in a hoarse voice, "Is there a wife who chases her husband out? Tonight, I'll sleep here with you." If she couldn't hear the beastly meaning in his words, then she would have wasted her time transmigrating through so many worlds. Without a substitute sticker, she refused to sell her body. Just one world was enough to make her scared. She would rather lose some favorability points than let this beast have his way. Wei Bai turned around and looked at him coldly. "I'm already injured, and you're still making it difficult for me to sleep." Fu Beija looked at her innocently and said in a low voice, "I'll sleep on the floor. I don't choose a place." She would be a fool to believe him. Wei Bai looked up and suddenly found that the mission had changed. The host ignored the small hint of my love and refused to open the wardrobe. "The mission has been upgraded. Please open the wardrobe within 1 minute." Did the wardrobe offend the system? Why did it keep making her open the wardrobe? Did it want her to change clothes on the spot for Fu Beija to see? Wei casually pushed Fu Beija away. "Come on, you go away from me. For the sake of saving you, can't you let me have some peace of mind?" Fu Beija saw her struggle and was afraid that something would happen to the wound on her arm, so he obediently retreated. She coughed softly, and Fu Beija immediately turned around to get some water. Wei Bai casually opened the wardrobe when he poured the water with his back to her. The arrow on the wardrobe changed. "Congratulations, host, for capturing a little bamboo horse." Under the arrowhead, Li Xinghe's handsome face with a hint of worry appeared. He curled up his body and squatted obediently in her closet. Li Xinghe saw her open the closet. His eyes were a little touched, but he did not dare to make a sound. Wei Bai, then, she slowly closed the wardrobe and locked Li Xinghe up again. Oh, my God. Hack the main system to death. She would pay for all the electricity. What was the point of hiding a man in the closet? What a cuckold. Wei Bai had just closed the wardrobe when Fu Beija turned around and walked in front of her with a glass of water in his hand. "Drink some water." She took it absent-mindedly and saw that the mission had changed again. The mission of discovering a little bamboo horse has been completed. Little childhood sweetheart, please successfully send the little bamboo horse to the south within 12 hours. Li Xinghe's assassination had failed. He was really destined to be the second male lead. Even after 2 successful assassination attempts, he still could not do anything to Fu Beija. She, this childhood sweetheart, was doomed. She sent him to the south every day. Was she going to the south? Wei Bai drank the water in one gulp and then put the glass on the table heavily. Fu Beija saw that she was murderous when she drank the water. He smiled and said, "Why are you suddenly angry? Are you really angry that I slept here?" As he spoke, he reached out to open the wardrobe door. At this moment, his actions turned into a horror film in Wei Bai's eyes. When the husband opened the wardrobe at home, the wife said that she would show him a living person. When the wardrobe was opened, there was a naked man. She was in a better situation. Li Xinghe was not naked yet. Li Xinghe and Fu Beija were mortal enemies. Wei Bai almost sprinted 100 meters and rushed in front of Fu Beija. She reached out to grab his collar and pulled his head back. In fact, his hand had already opened the wardrobe door. Li Xinghe's complicated expression was revealed. Wei Bai's expression was even more complicated than his. She grabbed Fu Beija's collar tightly and said without thinking, "Fu Beija, I have something to say to you." Fu Beija did not think so much and said, "What do you want to say?" Wei Wei Bai's brain stopped working. What could she say? What could she say to distract him? Fu Beija felt a little uncomfortable and wanted to turn his head away. Wei Wei Bai was already shouting in horror, "I want to have a child with you." Fu Beija, Li Xinghe, Wei Wei Bai, did she say something that she shouldn't have? Chapter 1062. Could the automatic reminder give her a sticker automatically? Ding! The automatic reminder reminded you that the sticker cannot be given automatically, but it can remind you to stand upside down if you want to give birth easily. Wei Wei Bai, screw your automatic reminder, you're the one who stands upside down, your whole family will stand upside down and give birth to a bunch of children as punishment. They all couldn't bear to see her doing well. She had no principles because she was forced, not because she was thick-skinned. Wei Wei Bai decided to give up on herself. She glared at Fu Beija fiercely, then reached out and pulled open her collar. "Do you want it that much?" Under her collar, her fair skin and beautiful collarbones were exposed. Fu Beija heard himself gulping. He nodded loyally. "You want to give birth, of course you need my help." Wei Wei Bai looked at him from the corner of her eyes, wanting to see how shameless he could be. Fu Beija did not disappoint, and said something even more shameless. "I'll be gentle, it won't hurt at all." After saying that, he lowered his head and was about to bite her flesh. The big bad wolf opened his mouth, wanting to swallow this tender piece of tofu. However, he suddenly sniffed. The smell of blood? He suddenly looked up, only to see that Wei Wei Bai's face was slightly pale, and her pink lips were pursed, looking a little pitiful. Fu Beija lowered his head to look, and his pupils shrank. The wound on her arm had actually split open. What happened? It had healed well, so why did it split open? Fu Beija immediately lost all thoughts. He held her arm with heartache, frowning. Why did it split open? Wei Wei Bai said unbearably, "I bumped into it when I was playing with you just now." When did she bump into it? Could it be that when he pushed her just now, she accidentally bumped into the wardrobe? He clearly did not have much strength, and he was very careful. He did not expect that her healing ability was so bad. Fu Beija anxiously pressed her to sit on a chair and then called for the people outside to bring in the first aid kit. He lifted her sleeve and saw that the bandage was indeed soaked in blood. It was a heart-wrenching pain. Her wound had finally healed, but because of his playfulness, it had been bruised. Girls were different from stinky men. Even a little bit of strength would hurt her. This was the first time Fu Beija blamed himself so much. He opened the medicine box and rolled her sleeves up to her arms. He then removed her bandages and saw that her wound was bleeding. Wei Wei Bai looked up at him. Seeing him seriously lowering his head, he cleaned her wound, applied medicine, and then put a new bandage on her. Fortunately, it's only a small crack, so there's no need to sew it up again. During this time, you're not allowed to touch water, and you're not allowed to use too much force. If you want to do anything, ask the servants to help. His hand was so warm that it burned her arm. The rough calluses of the spear rubbed against her skin, giving her a numb and rough feeling. Wei Wei Bai flinched. Fu Beija immediately looked at her worriedly. "Does it hurt?" Wei Wei Bai raised the corner of her mouth. "It doesn't hurt." She had purposely made the wound open just to avoid selling her body. In the end, he was too anxious. This man was actually not that much of a beast. Fu Beija looked straight at her smile and suddenly leaned over to steal a kiss. Wei Wei Bai was at a loss for a moment and stared at him. He smiled innocently. "Your smile is so beautiful. I've been seduced. Let's postpone the matter of having a child until your wound is healed. No matter how anxious I am, I won't hurt you." Wei Wei Bai's expression was indifferent, but there was a trace of gentleness and confusion. The Chapter 1063. She seemed to be moved. The delicate girl was like a magnolia flower, sitting in front of him and looking at him with a pair of pure black eyes. This feeling was really fresh. He had never experienced such a beautiful and quiet relationship before. Were all girls like this? Fu Beija thought for a moment and rejected it. No, only Wei Bai was like this. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 75. After Fu Beija finished bandaging her, he had someone clean up the room next door. He said, "You're right not to let me sleep on the floor in your room. I'm afraid that I'll turn into a wolf and eat you in the middle of the night, so I'll live next door." Wei Bai was still thinking about the man in the wardrobe. She couldn't help urging, "No one has lived next door for a long time, it's not comfortable. You should go back to the city." Fu Beija didn't listen to her at all. "Your hand is injured like this, I have to take care of you. Otherwise, am I still your man?" Wei Bai was speechless. It was too obvious that something was wrong. In fact, it was already a miracle that Li Xinghe could stay in the wardrobe and not be discovered by Fu Beija, who was as vigilant as a wolf. Maybe even Fu Beija didn't think of it. Li Xinghe would hide in her room. Plus, most of his attention was on her, so he didn't pay attention to the wardrobe. Wei Bai casually looked at the wardrobe and then lowered her eyes. "All right, do whatever you want." Fu Beija saw her like this. Could it be that she was shy? Although she was married to him, she was still a young girl. They didn't spend much time together. No matter how bold she was still from a traditional family. She would definitely be reserved when it came to matters between men and women. Even though he appeared to be in a hurry, he was still bashful deep down. Especially when he thought about the bed, his nose became hot and his face turned red. Wei Bai suddenly felt that something was wrong. She stared at Fu Beija's face. "Why is it so red?" Fu Beija suddenly stood up and immediately covered his nose. "Then you rest well, call me if you need anything." After saying that, he fled in a hurry. When he ran out of the house, he opened his palm and saw that his nose was bleeding. The bodyguard beside him looked at him in surprise. Fu Beija's face turned even hotter. He glared fiercely at the bodyguards and then ran to the next room to wash up. He had been too angry recently. He had such a little treasure by his side, but he couldn't really touch it. This kind of torture was simply too much. He didn't even dare to play more than a few rounds. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself. Fu Beija was worried about Wei Bai's wound. He did not know how many days it would take for it to heal. If she recovered quickly, he could have children with her too. Wei Bai saw Fu Beija go out, but she didn't open the wardrobe door. Instead, he opened the door and saw that there were many sentries outside. When Fu Beija arrived, he brought a bunch of soldiers with him. They surrounded the entire mansion. The elders in the mansion were probably going to be angered to death by this. After all, this was simply a blatant threat. Wei Bai glanced at the wardrobe. Li Xinghe was hiding inside. She didn't know how long he could last. After all, the wardrobe wasn't big. As a man, he had been hiding inside it. When it was time to escape, he wouldn't be unable to run far because his legs were numb, right? Wei Bai suddenly thought of something. She immediately walked to the wardrobe and gently opened it. Li Xinghe was leaning against the wardrobe. He seemed to be resting with his eyes closed, but the moment the wardrobe door opened, he immediately opened his eyes. There was a flash of light in his eyes. He also raised the gun in his hand. But when he saw Wei Bai, he quickly put away the gun in his hand. There was a trace of embarrassment on his face. Wei Bai didn't say anything. Instead, she bent down and rummaged around him. She found a set of men's clothes. Chapter 1064. Fu Beija had opened the wardrobe to look for clothes. When she had moved in, other than her own clothes, half of the wardrobe had belonged to Fu Beija. Chen Ru had ordered them to be brought over. It was also a way to win him over and announce that they were husband and wife. Fu Beija also knew that he planned to spend the night here, so he opened the closet to take the clothes. Li Xinghe saw that she did not speak, so he did not make a sound. He just stood there quietly. After she took the clothes out, she gently closed the closet door. Li Xinghe held his breath and released it. He smelled the fragrance she left in the closet. The narrow and dark environment did not seem unbearable. Wei Weibai opened the door and saw the guards bowing respectfully to her. She frowned. How was she going to get Li Xinghe out with these people blocking her way? Wei Weibai walked to the next room and knocked on the door. Fu Beija opened the door and saw her. He immediately smiled and took the clothes from her hands. Why didn't you let the servants take it? Your hand is still injured. I was worried that you would go back to the closet to take the clothes. Wei Weibai showed a sincere smile. I didn't use much strength. The room is cold. Remember to get someone to burn charcoal for you to warm you up at night. Fu Beija leaned against the door and looked at her smiling face. His heart softened. He reached out and gently touched her face. Her fair skin was delicate and delicate. It was completely different from the roughness of his fingers. Fu Beija said, I know. I will take care of myself before I can take care of you. He felt strange and happy that she cared about him. Wei Weibai looked at him affectionately for a while before saying, Can you withdraw your soldiers further away? I want to wipe my body. I feel uncomfortable with so many men around. Under her enchanting gaze, Fu Beija nodded blankly. Then, he suddenly woke up. His face was actually a little red. He immediately went out and kicked those soldiers' buttocks a few times. Go, go, go. All of you, stand guard outside. His woman needed to wash up. How could another man be around? Wei Weibai heaved a sigh of relief. She had finally gotten rid of those guards. Then she saw Fu Beija rushing over with a wooden basin of hot water. Wei Weibai had a bad feeling about this. But he said excitedly, Hurry up and wipe yourself. I'll get you some water and change. Wei Weibai's face turned red in anger. This guy had only been upright for 3 seconds. Being wretched was his true nature. Fu Beija saw that she was angry and said with a cheeky smile, I'm just helping, I won't do anything. Bai Weiwei really wanted to give him a butt and kick him out of the room. Fortunately, Fu Beija did not trust his beastly instincts. After he brought the water in, he asked her to wipe herself. I'll wait outside. I'll keep watch and get you some water. Wei Weibai was really at her wit's end. She knew that if she did not wipe herself, she would not be able to get rid of Fu Beija. She could only close the door. But she was still worried and pulled a chair to block the door. Then she opened the wardrobe and took a dress from Li Xinghe. Without even looking at him, Wei Weibai closed the door again. Li Xinghe blinked. She wanted to wipe herself? His heart immediately started beating like a drum, as if it was going to jump out of his throat. This could not be done. He was in the same room with her. If she wiped herself, wouldn't he be profaning her? Li Xinghe immediately opened the wardrobe door to stop her. But the moment he opened the door, he saw Wei Weibai squatting down and unbuttoning her collar. With her back facing him, her soft and fair fingers gently stirred the hot water in the basin. In the midst of the steam, she was beautiful and seductive. Li Xinghe stared at her in a daze. Wei Weibai felt that something was wrong. She turned around and saw Li Xinghe's dazed eyes. She lowered her head and looked at her collar. She had only unbuttoned one button and nothing was exposed. What was he looking at? Wei Weibai glared at him fiercely. She could not just sit in the wardrobe and be a clothes hanger. If she came out and Fu Beija saw her, it would be a problem. She immediately rushed over and closed the wardrobe door. Then she pulled a chair over. She leaned against the wardrobe door. She looked at the chair that was against the door. The wardrobe was against the chair. Wei Wei Bai could not help but squat down. Her husband was outside the door and her man was hidden in the wardrobe. She still had to take off her clothes here. She felt that this plot was getting weirder and weirder. To hell with your side mission. Chapter 1065. Then Bai Weiwei sighed, resigned to her fate. She casually wiped her body with a cloth and wet her hair. Then she changed her clothes, let her hair down, moved the chair in the wardrobe and the chair at the door away before opening the door. Fu Beija was squatting at the door. Of course, he heard the sound of the chair against the door. She guarded against him as if he was a thief. Fu Beija was not angry. After all, he was a bad person and not a good person. It was right for her to guard against him. Even Fu Beija felt that Wei Wei Bai was smart. She knew that he was a beast and did not give him a chance to be one. Anyway, he suddenly liked someone. Everything about her was right and he liked her. When Fu Beija heard the door open, he turned to look and saw Wei Wei Bai standing at the door looking at him. Her long black hair was down and she was wearing a white dress. The light of the setting sun shone on her face at the door, making it look beautiful. He stared at her for a few seconds before he got up and walked through the door. He rolled up his sleeves to move the wooden basin. Wei Wei Bai was a little nervous. Never mind the wardrobe. That wardrobe was poisonous. Fortunately, Fu Beija did not think too much and left after moving the wooden basin. He had evil intentions, but he was worried about Wei Wei Bai's wound, so he let her go for the time being. After he finished packing up everything, Fu Beija walked up to Wei Wei Bai calmly and looked at her without saying a word. Wei Wei Bai looked at him speechlessly. "Aren't you going to do something?" He could not pretend to be calm for more than 3 seconds before he started to talk glibly again. Wei Wei Bai leaned against the door, wishing she could get rid of him quickly. Do what? Fu Beija saw that she really did not want to do anything. He felt wronged and suddenly strode forward. He reached out and hugged her waist, pulling her into his arms and kissing her. The kiss was restrained and gentle, but it had a burning passion. He said in a low voice, "You have to thank me for my gentleness." Wei Wei Bai pushed him away and said with disdain, "Who would ask for a reward for helping his wife carry a basin? You're not gentle, you're stingy." The title of my wife was really pleasant to hear. Fu Beija obediently let go of her, not daring to go too far. He smiled and said, "All right, let's eat dinner together and then rest early. I won't do anything to you during this time." He sounded as if he was going to do something to her in the future. Wei Wei Bai was really afraid of the side mission. She even suppressed the urge to flirt with Fu Beija. She couldn't wait to get late so that Li Xinghe could get out of her closet. The target of the strategy this time. He was not a kind character. Although she wasn't a pervert, she had grown up with blood on her hands. If she was found to be hiding Li Xinghe, she would definitely be punished. That scene would only happen if the favorability was 100. Otherwise, Fu Beija's torture tools would have been used on her. There was no social security, no painkiller, and no system to chat with. It was too miserable. In the past, she thought that it was very unfortunate that she met a system that couldn't let her fly. In the end, what was even more unfortunate was that she didn't even have a system. If the system came back, she wouldn't despise it anymore. It was actually very good. After dinner, she finally got rid of Fu Beija, who was eyeing her covetously. She hurried back to her room. When she opened the closet, she felt that if Li Xinghe was smart, he would have escaped when she and Fu Beija were in the dining room. The guards outside her room were all outside. If he wanted to escape, he had many ways. In the end, when she opened the closet, she saw Li Xinghe looking at her with a pair of bright eyes. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. What a fool. She really wanted to beat this bastard to death. Chapter 1066. Li Xinghe had been curled up for a long time. His legs were numb, but he did not come out of the wardrobe. It was as if he had become a wardrobe spirit and the wardrobe was his true form. Wei Wei Bai did not have a good attitude towards this side mission. Hurry up and come out. I'll take you to the train station while no one knows. This time, don't come back after you go south. You can't win against Fu Beijia. Side missions could not win against the main mission. Accept your fate. Li Xinghe looked at her with a strange expression. Finally, his voice was a little hoarse. Why are you helping me? The person I want to kill is your husband. You even risked your life to save him. It's not that you don't have feelings for him. Wei Wei Bai lowered her voice and said coldly, helping you is a favor. Just remember it. And saving Fu Beijia is my duty. After all, he is my husband. Li Xinghe showed a bitter smile. Husband? Then he sighed. I came too late. No. I came too early. I didn't understand love. When love was deep, I missed it. They had known each other since they were young. But they had not been together for a long time. When they met again when they grew up, they missed it. Wei Wei Bai. The target of this side mission was supposed to be warm and sunny. Was there something wrong with it? It was supposed to be a big idiot who groaned and looked up at the starry sky. She fished in her sleeve and pulled out a handkerchief. Then Wei Wei Bai passed the handkerchief to him. Li Xinghe's eyes trembled. He took the handkerchief excitedly. Did she have feelings for him too? So she gave him a keepsake. He took the handkerchief. Why did it feel warm? He opened the handkerchief. A drumstick? Wei Wei Bai stood outside the wardrobe and looked at him coldly. Hurry up and eat. Once you're full, your mind will be clear. If you continue to be sad, I'll have to hold a funeral for you. Was it easy for her to steal a drumstick for him without arousing suspicion? If this side mission kept nagging her, she really had no other way. Li Xinghe held the drumstick and his eyes reddened. He staggered out of the closet and carefully hid the drumstick in front of his chest. He was so touched by her sincerity. Wei Wei Bai watched as he stuffed the drumstick into his chest. After a moment of silence, she quickly walked to the door and quietly opened it. Halfway through, she gently closed it again. No, Fu Beijia was in the next room. With his vigilant nature, no one who passed by his door could escape. Wei Wei Bai turned her head and saw Li Xinghe sitting on a chair, staring at her blankly. Wei Wei Bai held her breath. She really wanted to destroy this guy's corpse and shove him into the well. Li Xinghe seemed to have seen enough. He rubbed his feet and stood up. I'll leave then. Wei Wei Bai couldn't wait for him to leave. However, she didn't know if the side mission would be considered completed if she let Li Xinghe leave by himself. The last time, it was also completed when she sent him to the train station. She didn't dare to take the risk and could only look around. Then, she moved a chair to the back window and opened it. Sure enough, there was no one outside. She turned around and said coldly to Li Xinghe, hurry up and follow me. There's still the last night train. Once you get on, you'll be safe. Li Xinghe looked at her familiar movements and the way she stepped out of the window with one foot. It was very natural and not pretentious. Li Xinghe followed Wei Wei Bai out of the back window. Then, the two of them sneaked out of the back door. There were even rickshaws in the middle of the night. However, it was expensive. Seeing the two of them sneaking around, she couldn't help but say, elope, big brother. Chapter 1067. Li Xinghe was embarrassed, his face was red. Don't talk nonsense. He unnaturally looked at Wei Wei Bai, but saw that her side profile was cold and unmoved. Li Xinghe also did not dare to look at her too blatantly. After all, looking at a girl too directly would make him look like a hooligan. The rickshaw quickly arrived at the train station. Li Xinghe did not have enough money on him, and refused to let Wei Wei Bai pay, so he secretly gave the driver a watch as the fare. The train was about to leave. Wei Wei Bai was very suspicious, afraid that Fu Beija, that wolf, would rush over from somewhere. The thrilling experience at the train station left a shadow in her heart. Fortunately, it did not. Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief. Hurry up and get on the train, don't go against Fu Beija anymore. Every time she went against him, she was the one who died. If this happened a few more times, she would be exhausted to death. Li Xinghe had a guilty look. I can't repay you for dragging you to take such a risk with me, but I will remember your kindness for the rest of my life. He did not dare to say that he liked her. She was married, and if he said that, it would make her feel unjust. He could not let others look down on her. In this era, women were always too harsh. Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back and looked at him calmly. Hurry up and leave. If you really want to repay my kindness, then don't try to assassinate Fu Beija anymore. This is my only request to you. Li Xinghe felt sour in his throat. Did she like Fu Beija that much? His eyes were teary, but in the end, he nodded. Okay, I won't kill him, I promise you. Let go of his father's murderer. Just because of one sentence from her. But Li Xinghe was not unwilling, because she had saved him twice. She used 2 of his lives in exchange for Fu Beija's life. Fair enough. The whistle of the train sounded. Li Xinghe knew that he really had to leave. If he did not try to assassinate Fu Beija again in the future, he would not be able to escape. He would not risk going north again. This might be the last time he would see her. Wei Wei Bai saw that the mission was still not completed. She then looked at Li Xinghe, who was standing there in a daze. Was this side mission clearly trying to kill her? Why are you still standing there? She took a few steps forward and pushed him towards the door of the train. Let's go. His tone sounded like he was chasing away a beggar. Li Xinghe nodded and said solemnly, see you later. Wei Wei Bai, who wants to meet a wardrobe spirit like you? Don't come back, please. Li Xinghe finally got on the train. The small mission was completed. Wei Wei Bai was so moved that she immediately turned around and ran away. Fu Beija was still next door to her. What if that guy found out that she was not there? She would be dead. Li Xinghe stood in the car and saw her sorrowful look, as well as her reluctance to leave while covering her face. Fog. He took out the chicken drumstick that was hidden in his chest and looked at the shiny orange chicken drumstick. It was as if he could see Wei Wei Bai's beautiful face. This was a gift from her to him. He wanted to keep it. Wei Wei Bai secretly entered the old house from the back door. The silence, the dark house, and the monster's huge mouth gave off a frightening feeling of coldness. Wei Wei Bai finally saw that the back window of her room was open. She immediately reached out and climbed up the window. Halfway up, she suddenly woke up. No, when she left, she closed the window. Why was the window open? Wei Wei Bai's lips trembled. She looked up and saw that the room was dark. In the darkness, moonlight shone in. A tall figure was sitting on a chair. Half of his face was gloomy and cold under the moonlight. Chapter 1068. He quietly watched Wei Wei Bai climb up the window. There was an extremely cold murderous look in his eyes, and there was even a desperate ruthlessness in them. Wei Wei Bai only had one feeling. She was cold. Fu Beija's voice was faint and deep. You're back. Where did you go? Wei Wei Bai didn't know whether to go up or run away. She squeezed out a sentence. I went to the toilet. Fu Beija smiled, but his smile was a little twisted. He whispered softly, I thought you wouldn't come back. After all, the wealth of the South must be a big temptation for a woman. Wei Wei Bai's hand trembled. Her foot fell from the window again, and her whole body fell out of the window. Fu Beija's tense body immediately jumped up. He rushed to the window in a rage and dragged Wei Wei Bai through the window into the room. Then he threw her onto the bed. In the darkness, his movements were like that of a wild beast hunting its prey. There was no pity, only aggression. He pressed on her shoulder with one hand and pinned her to the bed. He said word by word, "That man is Li Xinghe, isn't he?" Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips tightly. Her face was pale. She whispered, "Fu Beijia, calm down." Her tone was fragile and unspeakably pitiful. Fu Beijia pulled out an ugly smile. His eyes were so red that they could kill. "Calm down? If I hadn't come to see you because I was worried that your wound would hurt, I wouldn't have known that you ran away with a man." Wei Wei Bai glanced at the favorability rating. It didn't drop. This was even scarier. The deeper the love, the stronger the backlash when betrayed. She muttered, "I didn't run away." Fu Beijia glared at her, wishing that he could pierce a hole in her body to see if she was a black-hearted person. Suddenly, he let go of her and took a few steps back. Then he kicked the table away. The loud noise attracted the attention of the guard at the door. "Young Marshal?" Fu Beijia angrily roared, "Get lost." He then turned his head and looked at Wei Wei Bai, who was lying on the bed. "I'll give you a chance. Tell me, what did you do just now?" Wei Wei Bai got up and held the bedpost for support. She pursed her lips and looked at him. Under the hazy moonlight, her face looked even paler and more fragile, as if it would scatter with a gust of wind. Fu Beijia clenched his fist, loosened it, and clenched it again. In the end, he slammed the table next to him, making a frightening sound. As expected, Wei Wei Bai looked at him in horror. She had always been bold, but she was frightened by him. Fu Beijia suppressed his desire to kill. "Speak." Wei Wei Bai finally sighed and said, "He went to see a friend off." Fu Beijia laughed awkwardly. "Friend, bring him to me." He opened the door and someone immediately came over with a light. Several soldiers dragged a man over. Wei Wei Bai looked and saw that it was the driver of the rickshaw. As soon as the driver saw Wei Wei Bai, he immediately wailed and howled, "It's her, young Marshal. It has nothing to do with me. She eloped with a man to the station. I was the one who pulled her along, but I didn't know that she was the madam. If I had known, I wouldn't have dared to let her take the carriage." Fu Beijia said sarcastically, "Eloped?" The driver immediately said in a very experienced manner, "A man and a woman sneaking around. They even ran to the station at night. They must be eloping." Wei Wei Bai really wanted to beat this driver to death. Fu Beijia helped her. "Take him away and deal with him." His handsome face had a demonic ruthlessness, so cold that it could kill. The driver screamed as he was dragged away. Fu Beijia lowered his eyes and said coldly, "All of you go and guard outside. Don't let even a fly in. Without my orders, no one is to come in." Everyone retreated. Only Wei Wei Bai was left. Fu Beijia unhurriedly turned on the light. He saw that her small face was pale as she looked at him expressionlessly. She didn't beg for mercy and didn't speak. There wasn't a trace of guilt or fear towards him. Fu Beijia only felt that his heart was slowly being cut into pieces by a knife. His temples were throbbing non-stop. He slowly walked in front of Wei Wei Bai. Afraid that he would strangle her to death, he desperately suppressed his anger. "Do you really think that you can save Li Xinghe?" Wei Wei Bai raised her head. There seemed to be some worry between her eyebrows. Fu Beijia only felt that she was worried about Li Xinghe. He shattered her hope with every word, "My people were following you. He saw you and Li Xinghe go to the train station. I didn't let him stop you because I wanted to see if you really wanted to let Li Xinghe go. He laughed twice. Last time at the train station, you were deliberately held hostage by him. Let him go." Fu Beijia's hand grabbed her arm. Wei Wei Bai cried out as he grabbed her wound. Fu Beijia lowered his head. His voice was ice cold as his lips kissed her face. His eyes were dark and fierce. "How can you dig out my heart like this? I really hate you, Wei Wei Bai." Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 60. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com//transmigration system, male god, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here, comma. Chapter 1069. He had never placed a woman in his heart before. So this betrayal was like digging out his heart. It was so painful that he wanted to kill. Wei Wei Bai looked up at him. The fear in her eyes was replaced by calmness. You hated me from the start and didn't believe me. If I said that I wouldn't hurt you, would you believe me, Fu Beija? Her black eyes glowed like tears, but she held them back. Because of the conflict just now, her hair was messy on her fair neck, making her look even more delicate and charming. Fu Beija's fingers were still pinching her wound. Her blood stained his fingers. He should be used to the smell of iron. But smelling it made him want to vomit. Just like how he didn't believe a single word she said. Fu Beija revealed a cold and contemptuous smile. I hate you. I can't wait to put you in my mouth. You said that you wouldn't hurt me, but you let go of the person who wanted to kill me twice. Bai Weiwei, that man is my biggest enemy. He's the one who planned to assassinate me several times. You clearly know this. Weiwei Bai was in so much pain that her whole body was trembling. But she gritted her teeth. You're his enemy. But before this, he and I were friends. Everything has to be done according to first come, first served. I can't watch you kill each other. Now, she couldn't clear her name. Weiwei Bai decided to stake it all on this one throw. She would fight to the end. Since there was no use in explaining, she had to admit it. She could lose her favorability, but she couldn't ruin her character. Fu Beija's tone was a little strange. Friends? How long have you been friends? Weiwei Bai said in a low voice, we've known each other since we were 3 or 4 years old. Later on, when my family was in dire straits, his family went south and we lost contact. 3 or 4 years old, lost contact, reunited at a young age. It sounded so romantic. She could even act out a beautiful romantic drama. Fu Beija's heart was sour, his mouth was bitter, and his eyes were full of hatred. So after we met again, you cheated on me and even helped him escape. Do you want me to die so that you can live together with him? He clearly wanted to hang her up and torture her. He took back all his love for her. He didn't need to ask such a stupid question. Because he didn't care, no, he cared to death. Fu Beija clenched his teeth so hard that they were about to bleed. Weiwei Bai looked at him coldly. Suddenly, she couldn't help but laugh at herself. Do you have friends? Do you have any brothers? Do you have a life and death friend? Fu Beija did not want to answer. He did not even want to talk to her. But he couldn't control his mouth. Yes. On the battlefield, he had brothers, friends, and life and death friends. Weiwei Bai asked, if something happens to your brother or friend and you need to risk your life to help, will you help? Fu Beija said coldly, I will. Weiwei Bai raised her face, revealing her delicate chin. Her eyes were firm and calm. I will help too. If he wants to kill you, I will risk my life to save you. This is the relationship between husband and wife. If you want to kill him, I will help him escape. This is the relationship between friends. I am the same as you. We are both loyal. Fu Beija looked at her with red eyes. His expression was twisted and angry. You are loyal to him. Did you talk about hiding in the closet? There is no loyalty between women and men. There is only adultery. You stepped on my face. Do you still want me to praise you? Although Weiwei Bai's expression was calm. But her heart was like a stormy sea. Everyone knew that she hid a man in the closet. This was a stain that could not be washed away. Wei Wei Bai's expression was perfect. She did not show the slightest bit of inner collapse. Her eyes were sorrowful. She sighed faintly. Her lips were pale. She was like a flower bud that was about to fall. Before it bloomed, it would lose all its color. Chapter 1070. Think whatever you want. It's a fact that I helped him. You can kill me. Fu Beija was hurt by her words. His body felt like it was being pricked by thousands of thorns. The pain was so intense that he couldn't even hold her arm anymore. She should be in pain. He pinched her so hard. But he was the one in pain. He really wanted to kill her. No traitor could survive in front of him. He was able to survive in such a dangerous environment because of his ruthless methods and his vigilant and intelligent mind. He always knew what he should do and what he shouldn't do. What could be sacrificed and what was dangerous must be eliminated immediately. She betrayed him. He wouldn't believe anything she said, let alone any of her expressions. Outside the door, an adjutant said carefully and respectfully, "Young Marshal, we've caught the person." When Fu Beija heard this, he revealed a cold and bone-chilling smile. "Oh, we've caught him." He let go of her wound. Her arm was covered in blood. The blood flowed into her fingers. Her slender and fair fingers were dyed red, which was even more glaring. Fu Beija's fingers were also covered in blood. He took out a handkerchief from his pocket expressionlessly. It was the one she dropped. He carefully protected it. It was still very new. But now he took it out and crumpled it into a ball like a rag. After wiping the blood off his hand, he threw the handkerchief on the ground. Then he picked her up and walked out with a cold expression. "I've caught the person you want to save. I'm going to kill him in front of you with my own hands." His voice had never been so cold. Wei Wei Bai curled up in his chest. Her face was pale. Her arm was bleeding non-stop. The wound was torn open by his forceful pinch. Fu Beija was furious. Wei Wei Bai's mind worked quickly. She knew that she was in a difficult situation. The side mission was her obstacle, her life and death threshold. He would only give up after killing her a few times. Just as she thought of the side mission, Wei Wei Bai instinctively looked up. Your childhood friend is in a life and death crisis. Host, please complete the last small mission. Rescue the childhood sweetheart from the hands of the male lead and successfully let him board the train heading south. Also, add a parting words. Go south, go south, go south. Li Xinghe might as well change his name to Going South. Actually, this side quest was not called Childhood Sweethearts. Instead, it should be called A Childhood Sweetheart Sending Her Childhood Sweetheart South. He even wanted to give a parting message. Message, scram, scram, scram for me. Wei Wei Bai stared at the last time. This was the last time they would head south. Once they were done, they would be done with the side quest. If it wasn't for the fact that the punishment for this damned mission was the collapse of the Soul Channel. She really didn't want to do it. Even if the punishment was to expose her butt and dance in public, she would still dance. He suddenly realized that the previous punishments were actually quite good. Wei Wei Bai trembled a few times. Her bottom line was even lower. Fu Beija sensed that she was trembling. He resisted the urge to stop her bleeding. He wouldn't feel sorry for her anymore. She deserves to die. The car drove into the prison from last time. Wei Wei Bai was dragged forward by Fu Beija and stumbled. When he entered, he saw that Li Xinghe was hung up and beaten black and blue. This time, it wasn't special effects makeup. It was the real Li Xinghe who was beaten like a dog. Li Xinghe was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. When he saw Wei Wei Bai, his pupils constricted and he coughed a few times. Then, he fiercely spat out a few mouthfuls of blood and said coldly, "Fu Beija, don't drag unrelated people into this." Fu Beija, however, smiled. His smile was smug and murderous. Is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 1071. He held Wei Wei Bai's waist, sat on the chair, and pulled her into his embrace. He stroked her back with one hand and pinched her chin with the other. Yo, the cowherd really knows the weaver girl. You two are so alike. He said this, but stared at Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai's eyes flashed with a trace of pain. She did not say anything, but her stubbornness could be seen. One would rather die than submit. The other was silent. They were a match made in heaven. Fu Beijia's gaze was like a knife, as if he wanted to cut the relationship between the two. He breathed heavily and suddenly turned to look at Li Xinghe with disdain. You must have a vault in the north. I have heard of the Li family's wealth. The Li family's wealth created such a glorious family. They also had a vault and a granary in the north. Only the descendants of the Li family knew the location. Fu Beijia did not lack money, but he definitely did not mind having more money. He had wanted the Li family's wealth for a long time. Catching Li Xinghe was equivalent to catching a pile of money. Li Xinghe sneered, you set your sights on these things. Unfortunately, I didn't know. Even if you beat me to death, I still wouldn't know. He was stubborn. He could withstand any kind of punishment. He was not afraid of Fu Beijia at all. Fu Beijia faintly said, oh, and suddenly swept the table beside him with one hand. The tea and snacks on the table all fell to the ground and shattered, making an ear-piercing sound. Then he pressed Wei Wei Bai onto the table and tore open her collar without hesitation. Her slender neck and exquisite collarbone. There was also a faint trace of white that was exposed to the air. Li Xinghe's body trembled violently, and he coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood. His internal organs were injured, and as long as he was agitated, he would vomit blood. He angrily shouted, Fu Beijia, what are you doing? How could this man humiliate Wei Wei Bai like this? Was he trying to drive her to her death? Fu Beijia raised his head, the veins in his eyes spreading. He said fiercely, if I touch my own woman, do I need to report it to you? He thought he could handle this matter calmly. After all, it wasn't as if he hadn't faced even greater storms and terrifying dangers before. But he still overestimated himself. When he saw that Li Xinghe and Wei Wei Bai really knew each other, his rationality collapsed. Fu Beijia wanted to stab himself a few times. He did not allow himself to lose his composure and let others see that he had really fallen into the hands of a woman. Fu Beijia put his hand under her clothes and looked at her coldly. She bit her lips until they bled, and the tears in her eyes refused to fall. He had bullied her badly. Fu Beijia felt a sour feeling in his chest as he said, how could you betray me? These words were filled with unspeakable grievance. After saying this, he fiercely tore open her clothes, revealing a large piece of skin. Li Xinghe suddenly turned his head away and said in a hoarse voice, I'm telling you, Fu Beijia, don't touch her. Fu Beijia's movements froze. He laughed twice, but his neck was stiff as he angrily said, this is what you mean by being loyal. No matter how loyal I am, I will not use my ancestors' things to save people. The Li family's treasury was their foundation. When Li Xinghe handed over the northern treasury, it meant that he gave up everything in the north. In the future, not to mention assassinating him in the north, all of his Li family's businesses and spies in the north would be finished. He, Li Xinghe, would never dream of setting foot in the north in his life. If it weren't for the wealth in the treasury, Li Xinghe wouldn't have been able to organize these large-scale assassinations so quickly. However, Li Xinghe was willing to use those to save Wei Wei Bai. He wasn't happy at all. // Chapter 1072. He just wanted to cut Li Xinghe into pieces. Wei Wei Bai finally released her lips and said in a choked voice, my relationship with him is not as dirty as you think. Fu Beijia did not want to hear it anymore. He lowered his head and bit her lips. He twisted and turned, using so much strength that he wanted to swallow her. Wei Wei Bai finally struggled. She was weak, but she tried her best. To her, this kind of humiliation in public was enough to make her break down. Fu Beija, I can bear with it if you want to beat me or kill me, but you can't humiliate me like this. Fu Beija could barely hold on to her. Her lips slid across his cheek, bringing along a hot smell of blood. Her lips were already bleeding. Her arms were also covered in blood. Her face was so white and pitiful. For the first time, Fu Beija felt that she was going to be tormented to death by him. Women were really easy to torment. Li Xinghe was beaten to the point where his internal organs were bleeding, but he was still alive and kicking as he scolded him. He had only pinched her and kissed her, but her breathing had already weakened. Fu Beija hardened his heart and wanted to tear off all her clothes. He had always wanted to humiliate her. Only then could he be ruthless and let go of her. Fu Beija's hands that were on her clothes loosened and tightened. Her eyes were red, and she could not help but cry. She said, Fu Beija, trust me just this once. She was in despair. It was the bullet that had ricocheted off her feet when she entered his house to marry him. Her eyes were still full of spirit as she looked at him. But today, she was crying as if she was going to die. Fu Beija's heart was crushed by her appearance. He was soft-hearted towards her, but in the end, he hated himself even more for not being ruthless enough. He left her bitterly, then took off his jacket and threw it on her. With trembling fingers, Wei Wei Bai put on the clothes. However, Fu Beija gave her a gun and said, Kill Li Xinghe. This time, I will admit that you are still my woman. Wei Wei Bai stared at him blankly with a gun in her hand. Fu Beija was at the end of his patience. Hurry up and kill him, or I'll go back on my word. She killed Li Xinghe. He forgave her. Fu Beija felt that he was really a coward. Even though she had betrayed him, he still wanted to forgive her. If this was the taste of liking someone, he didn't want to taste it anymore. It was bitter enough. Wei Wei Bai actually wanted to complete the side quest as well. She suddenly raised her gun and pointed it at Li Xinghe. Li Xinghe also stared at her blankly for a few seconds. Then, he suddenly smiled and said nothing. He wanted to protect her. Any words could anger Fu Beija and implicate Wei Wei Bai. Anyway, his life was saved by her. He was willing to die in her hands so that she wouldn't be implicated by him. Fu Beija looked on coldly. He wanted her to kill someone so that she would remember this pain. So that she wouldn't dare to betray him in the future. Wei Wei Bai's face was pale and she suddenly said, Fu Beija, you really don't believe me? I don't have any feelings for him. Fu Beija's heart was burning. He sneered, do you think I'm stupid? If this isn't considered crossing the line, then what is? Do you want me to catch you lying on the same bed? What kind of loyalty was there between a man and a woman? He only saw that Li Xinghe's eyes were full of love for her. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were filled with disappointment. Her fingers were trembling and she couldn't hold the gun properly. Her arm had lost too much blood. She staggered a few steps and seemed to be about to fall. Fu Beija didn't think much of it. He strode forward and reached out to hug her. Wei Wei Bai took the opportunity to rush into his arms. She grabbed his collar and pressed the muzzle of the gun against his chin. Fu Beija didn't react for a moment. The fragile tears in Wei Wei Bai's eyes disappeared. Her face was cold. Let Li Xinghe go. Fu Beija's breathing became heavy. He gritted his teeth and said, What did you say? Wei Wei Bai, say it again. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment. Suddenly, she hit Fu Beija's head with the butt of the gun. Blood flowed from Fu Beija's head. Wei Wei Bai didn't hesitate anymore. She pressed the muzzle of the gun against his throat again. People outside, listen up. Your young Marshal Mu is in my hands. Prepare a car for me and send us to the train station. Fu Beija's head was full of blood. His face was gloomy as he said, "If you dare to listen to her." Wei Wei Bai didn't hesitate. She hit his head again with the butt of the gun. She was as ruthless as if she had killed her father. "I won't send you off. I'll die with him. You must be very happy pinching her wound, right? You must be very excited about tearing her clothes, right? Go and do your main mission when she's made of mud." Chapter 1073. The car arrived quickly. Wei Wei Bai dragged Fu Beija to the car. There was a circle of soldiers with guns outside. Fu Beija's head was full of blood. His eyes were also stained with blood. He stared at Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai's face was cold. Her lips were pursed tightly. There was a kind of desperate determination in her eyes. Li Xinghe staggered and followed. He opened his mouth several times, but swallowed his words. He did not expect that Wei Wei Bai would kidnap Fu Beija to save him. Li Xinghe knew that it was useless to say anything now. He had to escape with her. Otherwise, if Fu Beija counterattacked, he and Wei Wei Bai would die. Fu Beija was stuffed into the back seat by Wei Wei Bai. Li Xinghe did not care about his weak body. He immediately got into the driver's seat and drove the car to the train station. Fu Beija's soldiers immediately followed behind with a bunch of cars. Everyone was in a deadlock. They were all afraid of accidentally firing. Fu Beija did not resist. Wei Wei Bai's gun did not leave his throat for a second. She was too focused. Her hands were trembling because she used too much force. But she was not willing to give him any chance to escape. Blood flowed again on her arm. Fu Beija's face was also full of blood. He was facing her. Li Xinghe sped up and almost rushed into the train station. Suddenly, Fu Beija asked softly, "Do you like him that much? So much that you want to use me as a bargaining chip to save him?" These words were soft and cold. It was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue. But there was a trace of despair and sadness. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled a few times. Tears suddenly appeared in her black eyes. She blinked her eyes and held back her tears. She clenched her teeth and emphasized each word. "I don't like him. He's my friend, Fu Beija. I knew him when we were young. We were best friends. But we never had any feelings that we should not have. I once fell into the water. He pulled me out of the water. I remember this kindness." In the memories of that childhood sweetheart, there was indeed such a melodramatic plot. It seemed that it was to make their childhood sweetheart better. Kindness. Fu Beija's hatred and discomfort surged up at the same time. Kindness. You marrying me is kindness. You saving him is also kindness. By Wei Wei, I'm worse than him. She hit him for Li Xinghe. Wasn't Li Xinghe more important? Bai Weiwei's grip on the gun was particularly tight. Her long hair fell to her chest, and there was a trace of stubborn sadness on her face. "Because you humiliated me and doubted me." Fu Beija really hated her. He smiled sinisterly. "I didn't doubt you. Aren't you making me a cuckold? Why do I need to doubt you?" Wei Wei Bai was disappointed, but she stopped crying. She looked at him expressionlessly. Fu Beija was a little flustered. He felt that he had missed something. She laughed softly and self-deprecatingly. "You can think whatever you want. Since I dared to do this to you, I'm prepared to pay the price." Fu Beija's fingers were clenched tightly. His body was unbelievably tense and his eyes were red. He was like a leopard waiting to pounce, waiting for Wei Wei Bai to relax and take away the gun in her hand. She was such a gentle woman. She couldn't keep holding the gun against his throat with her injured hand. She would be tired and weak. She just needed to leave his throat for a second. He could take away her gun. Li Xinghe glanced at the rearview mirror and saw a very tense scene. Wei Wei Bai was almost sitting in Fu Beija's arms. Her black hair was spread out. In the afterglow, there was a soul-stirring beauty. Slash. Chapter 1074. But Fu Beija's face was covered in blood. His handsome face had a murderous look as he lowered his head and looked at her coldly. The two of them were strong against strong. Neither of them was willing to back down. It was as if they could die together in the next moment. Li Xinghe's heart tightened. He coughed out a few more mouthfuls of blood. Enduring the pain in his internal organs, he finally drove the car into the train station. He said, "Wei Wei, we're here. Let's get on the train." The time was just right. The train heading south was about to depart. Wei Wei Bai expressionlessly ordered, "Get off the train." Fu Beija felt both hatred and pain, but he still had a strange feeling. This was the first time that someone dared to order him so coldly and threaten him. He thought that she was just a tough rabbit. Even if she was very brave, she was still a rabbit. But now he felt that she was the same as him. They were both hunting animals. The difference was that he was already an adult wolf. But she was just a wolf cub. This was the first time that Fu Beija looked at her so seriously. The train's whistle began to sound. Wei Wei Bai's fingers trembled, but she did not move the muzzle of the gun. There was a strange sense of calmness on her pale face. It was as if she wasn't running for her life, but was going to do something sacred instead. Her eyes should still be clear, sparkling with light. But they were already showing their edge. Fu Beija did not admit that she was still very beautiful. She was different from any other woman he had seen before. She was so beautiful that she was hard and clear. He lowered his eyelids and was about to move his fingers. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said vigilantly, "Don't move. Don't move your fingers." Fu Beija laughed contemptuously, "How long can you hold on? Even if you get on the train, I can still find you at the next station." Wei Wei Bai said, "I'm not running." Fu Beija did not believe it. How could she not run? She treated him like this. If she didn't run, would she stay here and wait for death? Li Xinghe coughed a few times and climbed onto the train. He turned around and said to Wei Wei Bai, "Come on up quickly." Fu Beija's soldiers had already caught up and surrounded the train with their guns. Wei Wei Bai dragged Fu Beija onto the train. Fu Beija sneered, "What? Do you still want to take me south?" Wei Wei Bai waited. The train started to move, and the sound of the tracks could be heard slowly. Wei Wei Bai suddenly leaned close to him. She said, "Fu Beija, if my feelings for you in the beginning were gratitude, now it's no longer the same. I have never liked a man so much. But I won't change my beliefs just to like someone. I am like this to you and to Li Xinghe. It has nothing to do with love, it's all because of gratitude." These words were said indifferently and resolutely. Then Wei Wei Bai suddenly used her strength and even knocked into Fu Beija, pushing him off the train. Fu Beija landed on the ground, rolled on the ground and jumped up quickly. He turned around and looked at the train with a murderous look. But what he saw was a heartbreaking scene. He did not have time to threaten her and hate her. But fear filled his chest. Wei Wei Bai was on the train. The train was slowly accelerating, but the gun in her hand was pressed against her chin. Her eyes were calm as she said loudly, "I betrayed you and saved Li Xinghe's life. I will use my own life to repay you, Fu Beija." With that, her finger touched the trigger and was about to press it. Fu Beija's brain did not react, but his body had already rushed out to chase after the train. "Wei Wei Bai, stop!" He screamed at the top of his lungs. How could she commit suicide? Even if she died, he would be the one to kill her. Chapter 1075. Not like this, not like watching her die in front of him. Bai Weiwei smiled, sighed, and no longer hesitated. Her finger pulled the trigger. This action of pulling the trigger, in Fu Beija's eyes, was slow and terrifying. He had never experienced such horrible torture before. All the blood in his body seemed to be frozen. Only his heart was beating violently in his chest, and his ribs were about to break. There had never been a person's death that could make him suffer such torture. With a bang, the bullet hit the door of the train. Li Xinghe's face was pale, and his lips were trembling violently. His hand tightly grasped the gun in Wei Wei Bai's hand, and at the critical moment, he pulled the bullet away from her throat and hit the metal plate above their heads. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. Li Xinghe had already gone crazy and snatched the gun from her hand. She was about to protest. Li Xinghe's expression hardened, and he used his palm to hit the back of her neck. Her vision turned black, and she fell to the ground. The train started to move faster. Fu Beijia was still desperately chasing after the train. When he saw that Wei Wei Bai was saved by Li Xinghe, the fear in his heart immediately disappeared. For a moment, he actually thanked Li Xinghe for snatching the gun from Wei Wei Bai's hand. This woman, how could she be so strong? Li Xinghe hugged Wei Wei Bai, and looked coldly at Fu Beijia who was below the train. He shouted hoarsely, "You don't deserve her, Fu Beijia. I have never had anything to do with her. We are only friends." Wei Wei Bai used her own life to save him. He should also use his kindness to help her achieve her strength and innocence. He was not Fu Beijia. When he loved someone, he wanted her to be happy and well. He did not want to hurt or suspect her. Fu Beijia kicked something and fell to the ground. He ignored the pain and got up from the ground. The train had already run away. It was impossible to stop the train now, so they could only search at the next station. The adjutant behind him immediately rushed over. "Young Marshal, your injury." Fu Beijia pulled his sleeves and wiped the blood off his face. He said fiercely, "Chase after him. Stop the train at the next station and check every single one of them. If you see Li Xinghe, catch him no matter if he's dead or alive." The adjutant hesitated. "What about Madam?" Fu Beijia looked at him coldly, causing the adjutant to shiver. Fu Beijia suddenly turned around and walked away, gritting his teeth as he said, "Bring her back in one piece." Even if he wanted to torture her and kill her. It was time for him to make a move. No one was allowed to touch it, not even herself. Fu Beijia did not even bother to treat his wound and just got on the car that was chasing the train. After he got on the car and calmed down, he realized that his fingers were still trembling. He leaned back in his seat with a splitting headache. When he closed his eyes, he saw Wei Wei Bai holding a gun and looking at him calmly. Her black hair flew in the wind, her small face was as white as snow, but her eyes were filled with all her beauty. She had succeeded in making him think only of her. Whether it was hatred, love, or all kinds of complicated emotions. Fu Beijia's mind was firmly occupied with Wei Wei Bai. He suddenly sneered. "Kindness, kindness, you're so righteous. You're clearly forcing me to die." How could she fulfill his kindness to save someone? And she pointed a gun at him. Fu Beijia did not want to admit that what was rolling in his heart was grievance and jealousy. He was like a jealous man. When he hated someone, he clearly realized that his feelings for her still existed. Fu Beijia reached out to rub his face, but he wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. He reached out to cover his eyes and curled up his body in anguish. Slash. Chapter 1076. The first time he liked a woman. He liked her to the point of hating himself. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 65. Wei Wei Bai woke up from the shaking of the train. She struggled to blink her eyes. Only then did she remember that she had fainted. When she pointed the gun at herself, she had been looking for an opportunity. An opportunity for Li Xinghe to rush over. There was no system reminder. She could only rely on her own experience. So that scene just now was calculated and decided to take the risk after staking everything on one throw. Fortunately, the rhythm of her shooting was just right, giving Li Xinghe time to save her. She let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the side quest, she found that the side quest was almost finished. She thought about it. The previous quests didn't require her to personally send Li Xinghe south. It was enough to send him on the train south. She had already sent him on the train, so why wasn't it finished yet? Wei Wei Bai's mind was heavy. She had relied on herself to think and calculate too many things during this time. So her body was a bit weak. She quickly stopped herself from thinking and decided to empty her mind for a while. The main quest was now in hell mode because of her. She had to save energy to deal with Fu Beijia, who was about to go crazy. A good starting point for a target with a favorability of 0. In the end, it became a terrifying difficulty. Wei Wei Bai silently cursed the side quest 10,000 times in her heart. Suddenly she felt someone close to her. She opened her eyes and saw Li Xinghe with a worried frown, pulling the blanket over her. Seeing that she was awake, Li Xinghe was pleasantly surprised. "Are you feeling better, Wei Wei?" Wei Wei Bai looked at him in a daze. When would this side quest end? When she saw Li Xinghe, it was like seeing the main system's cheap face. She really wanted to slap him. Wei Wei Bai suppressed her impulse and forced a fake smile. "I'm fine." Li Xinghe sighed. "Don't do such stupid things in the future. If you want to prove your innocence, you can't use your own life." He finally understood that Wei Wei Bai liked Fu Beijia. She also had a strong and unyielding personality. She couldn't tolerate the person she liked doubting and insulting her, so she wanted to commit suicide. Wei Wei Bai's face was a little pale. She was tired. "I won't. I'm not that stupid." If it weren't for the fact that Li Xinghe would save her, she would have been taken aback. She had no choice but to run instead of putting on a show of suicide. If she committed suicide, perhaps Fu Beijia would be in a better mood and not hate her as much. Didn't her favorability increase by 5 points? Fu Beijia was probably thinking of ways to torture her to death. He would only be happy when he saw her in a miserable state. Wei Wei Bai was very experienced. Previously, many of her targets couldn't wait for her to die at the start. So when she acted pitiful and pretended to be a little white flower, he would be happy. Once he was happy, his favorability would increase. Thinking of this, why did she feel that she was living a miserable life? Wei Wei Bai quickly stopped thinking about it. The more she thought about it, the worse her mood became. She might as well continue being heartless. Li Xinghe saw her tired face and didn't dare to believe her words. He looked at her blankly for a while before saying gently, "Wei Wei, if you follow me to the south this time, I'll recognize you as my younger sister, okay?" She couldn't go back. He knew what kind of person Fu Beijia was. He would not let Wei Wei Bai go. Wei Wei Bai was about to shake her head. Li Xinghe said, "Don't reject me." He didn't dare to say that he wanted to pursue her. He was afraid that he would blaspheme her. But he loved her and was willing to do anything for her. Wei Wei Bai thought for a moment before replying, "I'll think about it. Actually, it's not suitable for me to go to the south with you. If I go with you, then Fu Beijia will kill his way to the south and kill you. With Fu Beijia's personality, he would definitely do such a crazy thing. He would probably beat her to death as well." Li Xinghe sat up straight and looked at her with a deep and gentle gaze. Although his face was scarred, he still looked elegant and handsome. "Wei Wei." His voice was calm, but it seemed like he had used up all his strength. "Don't use your life to protect me. In the future, let me use my life to protect you." Chapter 1077. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. She did not expect him to be so serious. After Li Xinghe finished speaking, he revealed a gentle smile, as if he did not feel that he had said anything serious. He brought over a glass of water. "Drink this. I'll go to the restaurant to get some food. We still need a long time to go south. You need to eat." Wei Wei Bai had no choice but to take the glass. She saw that her arm had already been bandaged. On the train, Li Xinghe was very familiar with it. He was able to get some basic things. He was indeed the little prince of the south. After sitting on the train so many times, he had gained experience. After eating, Wei Weibai said, "We have to get off the train halfway. We can't get off at the next station. At the next station, the train will definitely not leave." This was because Fu Beijia was waiting. Li Xinghe smiled. "I know. There will be a transit station later. The train should stop for a while. When the time comes, we can quickly get off the train and change to another train." There was not only one train at the transit station. Trains from other tracks would also come. It would only stop for a short while. At that time, it would not be too late to change trains. Wei Weibai nodded. Although she did not intend to go south, she could only avoid it for a while. Otherwise, Fu Beijia would be angry and get caught by him. Her head would probably be blown off by him. The train stopped very quickly. Li Xinghe carefully helped Wei Weibai off the train. There were many people at the transit station. They walked to the other side and saw another train coming from afar. The train stopped and started very quickly. They had to grasp the timing quickly. Otherwise, they would miss it. When the other train stopped, Li Xinghe immediately walked forward. He got on the train and reached out to hold Wei Weibai's hand. "Hurry up, the train is about to leave." Wei Weibai nodded and was about to reach out. Suddenly, Li Xinghe's expression changed. "Lie down, Wei Wei." Wei Weibai didn't have time to react. She didn't lie down, but a bullet passed by her and shot toward Li Xinghe's forehead. Li Xinghe instinctively rolled into the train to avoid the bullet. But the train starts, and Wei Weibai doesn't have time to get on. Li Xinghe leaned on the train, stretched out his arm and shouted anxiously, "Hold my hand, Wei Wei." Wei Weibai's heart tightened. She took a few steps forward and reached out to grab Li Xinghe's hand. His other hand gripped her fingers tightly. Under the sun, that hand was slender and beautiful. There were calluses on the palm, which made Wei Weibai's hand hurt. She was pulled into a hot and strong embrace. Wei Weibai heard the hot and messy breath of the man behind her blowing on the side of her face. Escape? Where else can you escape to? Wei Weibai's body stiffened. She looked up and saw Fu Beijia's tense jaw. His eyes were cold as if covered with a layer of frost as he looked at her, exuding a murderous aura. It couldn't be any colder. Fu Beijia was too fast. Fortunately, Li Xinghe didn't have time to get off the train and was taken away by the train. Wei Weibai saw that the side mission was stuck at the last point. She suddenly remembered that she had forgotten to say a parting word to Li Xinghe. If she had shouted, "Take care," just now, the side mission would have been completed. The side task was completed, Bai Weiwei lamented. Fu Beijia dragged Wei Weibai onto the train. He glanced at her arm. There was a doctor accompanying them on the train. Fu Beijia's head hadn't been bandaged yet. He just wiped his face with a towel. His face was dark and his eyes were cold. He looked like he was telling strangers not to come near and acquaintances to scram. The doctor took out the medicine box with trepidation and wanted to clean his wound. Fu Beijia said, "Remove her bandage." Chapter 1078. The doctor was stunned. When he saw Wei Weibai beside him, he immediately nodded and removed the bandage on Wei Weibai's arm. Bai Weiwei didn't resist at this point. At this point, even if Fu Beijia hung her at the back of the train and pulled her along, no one would dare to say anything. Once the bandage was removed, the wound on her arm became even more serious. The wound that was about to heal was torn apart by Fu Beijia's forceful pinch. Because she wanted to hold him hostage, she used too much strength. When they reached the train, she could only bandage it hastily. If it was allowed to worsen, she did not need to think about her arm. When Fu Beijia saw it, his eyes became even colder. Because Fu Beijia, who was like a killing god, was sitting beside the doctor, and because of Wei Wei Bai's identity, when the doctor cleaned her wound again, his hands and feet were tied. The cleaning technique was not neat, and Wei Wei Bai could not help but frown in pain. Fu Beijia suddenly snatched the tools from the doctor's hand, and then silently grabbed Wei Wei Bai's arm. Because his strength was simply too great. Wei Wei Bai's muscles trembled uncontrollably. Fu Beijia's fingers paused, but he said coldly, "You know the pain. You deserve it." After saying that, he quickened his pace of cleaning the wound. Then, he took a clean white bandage, applied medicine on her, and quickly helped her to bandage it again. After he finished bandaging, he did not care about what Wei Wei Bai thought. He dragged the medical kit and said to the doctor, "Deal with it." The wound on his head needed to be treated. Wei Wei Bai used all her strength and knocked a hole in his head. It looked scary, but it was not a fatal wound. It was lighter than Wei Wei Bai's arm. The doctor nodded and immediately cleaned him and applied medicine. When she was about to bandage his wound, Fu Beijia looked at Wei Wei Bai gloomily. "You do it." Wei Wei Bai saw that the look in his eyes was very scary. It was as if he wanted to kill her, but he was holding it in. Right now, it wasn't a matter of strategy. It was a matter of survival. Wei Wei Bai took the bandage and slowly wrapped it around the wound on his head. At the same time, she tied a small bow. Fu Beijia felt her approach and his breathing became heavier. He didn't know if it was out of anger or hatred. He suddenly grabbed her hand. "When Li Xinghe was injured, did you also bandage him like this?" Wei Wei Bai did not answer. Instead, she finished dressing her wound and sat down again. Fatigue was written all over her face. Outside the car window, night began to fall. Only the occasional light shone in, making the side of her face look even more pale and colorless. Fu Beijia's mind flashed with the image of her unhesitatingly pulling out a gun to commit suicide. He held his breath and suddenly reached out to pull her into his arms. His hands were already searching her body skillfully. Wei Wei Bai's silent attitude was finally broken. She struggled to get up. "Fu Beijia, if you want to hit or kill me, just say the word. Don't do this to me in front of outsiders." Her tone was extremely cold, but because of her trembling throat, there was a trace of grievance. Fu Beijia's fingers stiffened. He hesitated for a moment and actually let go of her. Wei Wei Bai immediately dodged and leaned against the car window. She grabbed her collar and looked at him warily. Fu Beijia sneered. "You said that you only like Li Xinghe and that you like me. How can you like me like this?" Wei Wei Bai helplessly raised the corner of her mouth, but she just sighed and did not answer him. This man was not easy to fool. It was useless no matter what she said. Without the right timing, she might lose his good impression of her. Fu Beijia's heart was burning with anxiety when he saw her half-dead state. With a sweep of his hand, he swept the box of pills away and said, "Go to the hospital." Chapter 1079. He would never admit that he had been searching her body to see if she had a gun on her. Although he was only halfway through the search, he reacted quickly. Since Li Xinghe saved her, he would not take the risk of letting her hold a gun. After going to the hospital, Fu Beijia pulled Wei Wei Bai to see the doctor again with a gloomy face. Although the wound was treated, it was not as professional as the hospital. Wei Wei Bai's wound was stitched up again. The doctor repeatedly reminded her not to touch water and not to use force. Otherwise, this arm would not be able to recover. Wei Wei Bai sat quietly and did not answer. Instead, Fu Beijia said impatiently, "Okay, let's go home." "Go home?" Wei Wei Bai looked up at him. Fu Beijia did not look at her at all. The so-called home was Fu Beijia's house in the city. It was a 4-story house with a beautiful garden and balcony. There was also a lotus pond. It was not as spacious as the old house, but it could be said to be exquisite and comfortable. Fu Beijia had more than one property, but this was the best place. The house was heavily guarded. After entering, it was difficult to leave without permission. After Wei Wei Bai was sent in, she realized that her things had been sent in before her. She thought that after Fu Beija caught her, he would torture her body and lungs like the prison version of torture. It was dinner time, and the servants served the dishes. Both of them did not look good. One of them had a bandage on her arm, and the other had a bandage on her head. They were in the same boat, but they looked at each other coldly. When Wei Wei Bai was eating, she only ate the dish in front of her silently. She did not move because her arm was in so much pain. Halfway through the meal, she noticed that Fu Beija was looking at her gloomily. She looked up without any expression. The target was not easy to win over. It was a critical stalemate now. Actually, Wei Wei Bai felt that this situation was already very good. That 65 favorable impression level was already very useful. Fu Beija could not bear to torture her. After all, Fu Beija was not a soft-hearted man. Right now, she had to maintain the 65 points of favorability and not let it drop. Only then could she find an opportunity to slowly increase the favorability. Therefore, when faced with Fu Beija's gloomy expression, Wei Wei Bai decided to maintain her expressionless face. He continued to eat the white rice and the plate of vegetables in front of him. Fu Beija stared at her for a while and finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He shouted at the maid, "I don't like this dish. Put it over there." The maid immediately came up and moved the dishes he didn't want it to Wei Wei Bai. Fu Beija was not satisfied. He ordered a few more dishes and took them away. They were all lined up in front of Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai had just finished a bowl of rice and was full. She looked at the extra dishes in front of her and looked at Fu Beija with some doubt. Fu Beija lowered his head and looked at her coldly. He quietly ate the rice. Wei Wei Bai put down her chopsticks and said, "I'm done eating. You can do as you please." After saying that, she put down her chopsticks and walked away. Fu Beija looked at the other party's empty chair and the dishes he asked someone to move over. None of them were touched. He suddenly couldn't eat anymore. After eating a few mouthfuls of rice, he finally couldn't swallow and put his chopsticks on the table. Then he said coldly, "Clear the table." Wei Wei Bai's room was Fu Beija's room. She went upstairs and washed herself simply. She wore a light green thin dress and walked out of the bathroom. She saw Fu Beija sitting at the table handling business. Chapter 1080. Actually, when Fu Beija was pressing down on her and doing things that were worse than a beast, she felt that he was especially hot. But she thought that it was because of lust. She did not expect that this man was actually having a fever. Wei Wei Bai reached out and touched his forehead. There was no sweat, but it was very hot. His face was also burning red. Maybe it was because of the fever, but he did not have his usual vigilance. His usual cold and sloppy side was nowhere to be seen. His eyes were closed, and his eyelashes were thick and beautiful. His face was red and had a hint of fragile beauty. For a man, gorgeous was obviously not a good description. But it did not feel wrong to use it on Fu Beija. This man was already arrogantly handsome, and his appearance was too outstanding. He did not have his usual aura, which showed the advantage of his face. Wei Wei Bai stared at him for a few seconds, then slowly looked down. The system finally could not help but ask carefully, "Do you want to castrate him?" The host's gaze was like a knife, cold and sideways, as if she wanted to cut off the male lead's thing. Wei Wei Bai moved her body. She got off the bed with great effort, and her lower body was like a cripple. She said hatefully, "I really want to castrate him, if the affection level is not 0 and goes back to negative." After saying that, she opened the closet and changed her clothes. She did not bring many of those old-fashioned clothes. Most of them were newly made cheongsams, overcoats and expensive fox sweater collar jackets. She ignored them and casually took out a cheongsam with half sleeves and put it on. Then she went downstairs to call the doctor. The doctor came quickly and confirmed that Fu Beijia's fever was caused by the wound on his head. Although the wound was not fatal, Fu Beijia did not treat it immediately, and he did not get a good rest. This caused the fever to come so fiercely. Wei Bai secretly scolded him as a beast. He still wanted to force himself on her even when he had a fever. He was simply a beast among beasts, and he was a beast among beasts. Fu Beijia was sleepy, but he was still very vigilant. When the doctor lowered his temperature, he suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze was terrifyingly cold. The doctor was almost scared to tears. He glared at the doctor a few times. Then, as if he suddenly thought of something, he immediately turned his head to look around. He actually looked a little panicked. It wasn't until he saw Bai Weiwei that he relaxed. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Weiwei Bai, allowing the doctor to treat him. Weiwei Bai sat on a chair at the side. Her face carried a trace of imperceptible worry. Her posture of leaning on the chair was indescribably languid and beautiful. This was not the first time Fu Beijia saw her wearing a cheongsam. When she wore the cheongsam, her curves were like flowing water, natural and elegant. Her snow-white arms and exquisite calves were both eye-catching and beautiful. The beauty that couldn't be seen when she wore old-fashioned dresses could be seen when she changed into a cheongsam. He didn't want her to wear a cheongsam for outsiders to see. But when he thought about it, if he kept her in the small building, she would not be able to see any outsiders. In that case, she would just wear a cheongsam for him to see. Therefore, he locked up all her old-fashioned dresses and had people make many of the latest cheongsams. It was indeed very good and very beautiful. Fu Beijia stared blankly at Weiwei Bai until he was exhausted from the fever again and fell into a deep sleep. However, he could not sleep well. From time to time, he would open his eyes to look for Weiwei Bai. In the end, her heart finally softened. She frowned and sat by the bed, reaching out to hold his hot fingers. Sleep, I haven't left. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.